Chapter 61, Chapter 60. Gu Dongjae's expression turned grim again, and he glared at Suho. What did you say? I will fight alone and from afar. Why? Might get in the way of my leveling up. He continued inside his head. My personal experience will decrease. If he has allies fighting alongside, he would receive less experience. Besides, it's already a raid group with a lot of rookies. If Suho's summoned beasts appear, the battle lines would get messed up and they would be a nuisance to each other. I guess I left out too many words. What? Who is disturbing whom? Huh? Grab. Gu Dongjae's big hand grabbed Suho's collar. He tried to lift him. Huh? Suho's body did not move. What? Hup? Gu Dongjae was flustered and put strength on his forearms to lift Suho up. To no avail. Suho's body, which seemed light at first glance, did not move no matter how hard Dongjae tried, as if Suho had been glued to the floor. Enough, my clothes will be stretched. Suho grabbed Dongjae's wrist and slightly bent it. Ack! A scream mixed with pain came from Gu Dongjae's mouth as he moved his body while his wrist was slightly twisted. Ah, sorry, I can't control my strength these days. He was sincere. Suho shuddered and shook his hand. Then, Gu Dongjae's wrist swayed like a paper doll. Ouch! My! Gu Dongjae was also surprised by that. The other hunters who were watching nervously from the side were also taken aback. Even Suho, the party involved, was shocked. Huh? Could it be broken? No, right? Why are you so weak? You! Ugh! Gu Dongjae glared at Suho while twisting in pain. In those bloodshot eyes, Suho, oh, you must be in so much pain. He hurriedly took out an item. Use item, mummy bandage. Whirl. What's that? Suddenly, a white bandage flew like a snake from Suho's hand and wrapped around Gu Dongjae's wrist. It was forcibly fixing his wobbly wrist. Swoosh! Ack! Of course, the process was also painful. Okay, that should be fine. Someone please heal him. Hearing Suho's words, one of the 3 Beiko Guild members, a healer, came up to him and grabbed Gu Dongjae's wrist. Ah! Be patient. He completely injured me and healed me as well. The healer smiled and treated Gu Dongjae. He himself was also annoyed by Gu Dongjae's behavior, but the scuffle ended at just the right time. Fighting like that in front of a dungeon was common among hunters, especially for freelancers who are not affiliated with a guild. After all, hunters are fighters who risk their lives to kill monsters and make money. With superhuman strength involved, it was only natural that they were quite violent. Even if one got hurt anyway, there was a healer. But what are these bandages? Did it just set the broken bones perfectly? As the healer looked at the bandage on Gu Dongjae's wrist, a different thought came to his mind. Sometimes in dungeons, items with these special attributes are found. However, he had never heard of a bandage that automatically moved and wrapped around injuries. Normally, these things are disposable consumables. To dare to spend such a valuable item on a guy who was just arguing with himself? Fixing the dislocated bone as an emergency measure and then applying healing naturally would affect faster treatment with lesser mana consumption. Could it be that he had purposely used his items so that the healer's mana would not be wasted due to such an incident? A rookie who has just awakened manages the amount of mana of his team members? He's the one with a real sense of leadership. Did he read the healer's thoughts? The Beiko Guild members exchanged glances with each other, as if they were thinking the same thing. He was a guy who was interesting in many ways. Who said this team was a mess? It's so much fun. Meanwhile, Gu Dongjae, who was receiving treatment for his wrist, was breaking out in a cold sweat at what he had just experienced. Was he really a summoning hunter? No, right? That summoning hunter was such a monster. It didn't make sense. If he was a C-class hunter, he surely could have had other skills. However, for a C-class hunter, Suho's mana power is almost the same as him. The reason summoning hunters were ignored in the first place was because most of their mana was spent on summoning. Didn't he already summon a black pet the size of his hand from a long time ago? Ah, could it be that the black guy is a summoned beast that gives a strength buff? Yes, it was probably like that. Gu Dongjae looked at Beru. What are you looking at? You're worse than a worm. Quit staring. Beru instantly came up to his nose and confronted him face to face. Gu Dongjae quietly avoided those ferociously raised eyes. Times Square Field. Only Beiko Guild is allowed inside. Before anyone knew it, the raid team that Suho belonged to arrived in front of an enormous building. Times Square building, once a landmark of Yeongdongpo. This place had now turned into a demonic cave completely covered with blue mist. A field-type dungeon. Since Seoul has so many large buildings, there were many places where dungeon break occurred. It is said that field-type dungeons, which have already been pioneered to some extent, are safer than unknown dungeons beyond the gates. Still, they should stay vigilant, because it is a C-class field. As soon as they stepped into the field, they could see the inside of the large and magnificent Times Square at a glance. A courtyard structure with a hole in the middle and corridors on each floor along the perimeter. Its appearance was reminiscent of the Pantheon. However, the thorny vines that covered all the walls and ceilings were crawling like living creatures. We're finally in the dungeon. Gu Dongjae, who had previously said he would become a leader, was trembling. The other newbie hunters were also very tense. Suho smiled and patted Gu Dongjae on the back. Hey, what are you doing? The captain should take the lead. Yeah! Gu Dongjae's body moved forward, and he was at the forefront of the hunters before he knew it. Suho slips past him. I will move separately, as I said. Hunter Sung Suho, a member of the Baiko Guild, called for Suho. I'm not going to stop you from acting independently, but I hope you don't get too far away, because it's dangerous. It was unreasonable to expect strategic team play from a temporary raid group of freelancers. He didn't intend to get involved in the operation of the raid, but as a senior hunter, he still had to be responsible. It would make it difficult for us to protect you when a villain appears. Yes, sir. Suho answered meekly, but for a different reason. If I go too far, it'll be hard for me to come back when a villain appears here. Suho was just on his way to separate from the hunters. Oh no. Suho stopped walking and his expression hardened. Surrounded already? Shh. It has only been less than a minute since they entered the field, but the alien invaders who occupied the place were already surrounding them on all sides. Wooden dolls made of tangled vines with thorns. Heek! The very unpleasant-looking monsters screamed and attacked the hunters. The speed was faster beyond imagination, and the movement was as bizarre as it appeared. It's the beginning of the hunt. Suho's eyes glimmered intensely as he jumped forward. The other hunters suddenly came to their senses and started fighting. Everyone beware, there's paralysis poison in their thorns. Just brushing against the thorns will dull your senses. A Baiko Guild member shouted from behind. There's poison? So, Suho received the reward after completing the pyramid quest. Blessing, Great Spellcaster Kandiaru's protection. Great Spellcaster Kandiaru has a special spell for you. As long as Kandiaru's blessings are with you, you will always be able to enjoy a strong and healthy life. Let there be light in the future of the challenger. Lasting effect, illness-free long. Evity. You become immune to all diseases, toxic, hazardous, and poisonous effects, and your regenerative ability increases enormously while sleeping. Immune to all poisons. To Suho, poison was not something to be afraid of. However, the thorny vine that swung like a whip was threatening enough on its own. Even the other hunters seemed to be in a hurry because of the endless attacks from all sides. Summons. When the battle started, the summoning hunters, who were at the back, called their summons. Flamethrower. Little fireflies, burning red, flew in all directions and began to explode from the body of Woodvine, the thorned vine scarecrow. Boom! Puff! Red flames clung to the vines of the Woodvine began to roar. Hey, it's a flamethrower! It kills them! There are a lot of summoning hunters on our team. Hunters called for joy as if they had never ignored the summoning hunters. The Baiko Guild could have also sent experienced summoning hunters there because they had an idea. Tuck! Tuck! Woodvine boldly cut off its vines that caught fire. No arms, no head. Keek! It jumped back like a zombie. Oh my! Hey, you persistent bastard! Are there no more flamethrowers? What are you doing? Keep summoning. Gu Dongjae, who was at the forefront of striking down Woodvine with a huge sword, urged the summoning hunters. However, they couldn't summon beasts continuously without rest. It will take a while to resummon. What? Oh well, that's how summoning hunters are. Right then, Suho was marching in the middle, approaching the Woodvines. Hunter Sung Suho, it's too dangerous, come back here. The healer of the Beiko Guild was startled and shouted urgently. "This is perfect, right?" Suho exchanged glances with Beru and nodded. They were quite far away from the team, so now it was just a matter of doing it at random without anything getting in the way. Dozens of thorny scarecrows rushed at Suho. Done. In the center of them, Suho smiled and stomped on his own shadow. Arise. That moment. Kia! The mummies, wrapped in black bandages, stood up all at once, shadow mummies simmering black steam all over their bodies. They opened their mouths and began to let out ferocious screams at enemies who dared to harm their master. "What are those, mummy?" All the hunters who were in the midst of a breathless battle from afar were fascinated. In the pouring gaze, Suho gave an order to the shadow mummies. Like the pharaohs of Egypt in an old legend, kill each other from now on, and be my new shadow. Chapter 62, Chapter 61. So far, there have been two main ways in which Suho summoned shadow soldiers. One is releasing the monsters he just killed on the spot and using them as soldiers. The other is storing corpses that have been killed in advance in the shadow dungeon and releasing them when needed. Now, he has got one more type of shadow soldier. It was the corrupt mummies that infested the pyramid of Ammit. They were basically moving corpses, so to Suho, they were like triangular kimbap at convenience stores that he could easily take out and eat right away without having to fight. General class. That was how 20 shadow mummies were created. Their stats were quite strong enough that the Scavenger Guild and Asura Guild had a hard time. Strength, agility, and zombie-like tenacity. Above all, the poison leaking through the gaps in their bandages constantly corrupting nearby enemies. The corrupting poison was the reason why Suho tried to stay away from other hunters. Slash! The shadow mummies began tearing and breaking the woodvine's thorny vines. Paralysis poison of thorns? That kind of thing didn't work on the mummies. Rather, it was the opposite. The thorny vines were contaminated with the shadow mummy's poison and began to rot. The wood vines fought back with strong force. Even the shadow mummies couldn't be safe. The bandages were torn from being caught on the thorns, and their limbs that were entangled in the vines were ripped off. But swoosh! Immediately, a new black bandage moved around. The messengers of death, who had all their injuries restored, rose again. Their momentum was like a demon that had risen from hell. Hunters were in great shock. Goodness! What are we seeing? I can't believe they are all summoned monsters. They began to doubt everything they knew about summoning hunters. In particular, Gu Dongjae, who personally argued with Suho earlier. That's crazy. What happened? Didn't he just use summoned beasts to give him strength buffs? At that point, Dongjae wasn't even sure if it was a simple strength buff. Beru, who Dongjae thought had been summoned from the beginning, was just watching the battle while yawning in the air. Ha! Come to think of it. Go Dongjae suddenly realized something. His gaze moved to the bandage still wrapped around his wrist. This bandage can't be... The one who responded to those words was the healer of the Beiko Guild who had treated his wrist earlier. Ah! A bandage that moved and wrapped itself around his wrist and bandaged mummies fighting like demons. Could it be that the bandage wasn't an item, but a summoning technique? It was only then that things came to fit into place. Gu Dongjae suddenly thought of something and hurriedly began to loosen the bandage wrapped around his wrist. Ah! No wonder he injured me then healed me as well. Something was wrong from the start. This isn't cursed, is it? Ah! He was afraid that because of the bandage, he would become like those black mummies. Suho tilted his head when he saw Dongjae at a distance. What's wrong with him? That's what I'm saying. He's only a worm-skinned scaredy fellow. Tsk. Beru clicked his tongue and jumped to Suho. He looked around with a serious expression. More than that, young master. The atmosphere is strange. I felt it too. Leaving all the battles in the hands of the mummies, Suho himself had been observing the surroundings from earlier. Eventually, he found something strange. Wing. There was a very slight buzzing of a fly that could be heard if he paid attention. Suho and Beru's gazes turned upward at the same time. Bee. Far away in the air, extremely ordinary. A tiny bee was flying around. It was just one bee, but it didn't quite make sense. A normal bee lives in a demon cave like this? Where there are no flowers, there is no way honey will come out of those thorny vines. You think so too, right? Suho and Beru looked at each other with that confident eyes and nodded. A-level villain Lee Min-seong, and the wings of a bee attached to his back. Could he be hiding here somewhere? If so, what a coincidence indeed. However, when he thought so and looked at the surroundings once again, is this a giant beehive? Courtyard structure with a hole in the middle. Was it because of the vibes that the entire Times Square building looked like a beehive? In that sense, they had already entered the beehive on their own feet. One by one, the flying bees were increasing. No matter how much the bees increased, it was not a threat at all to the hunters with superhuman strength. A wasp might be a bit dangerous, but chills. Suddenly, Suho's senses stat sent a warning. He turned his head to look around. Wow, my words came true. It was a wasp. Wow, hundreds, no, thousands of wasps were swarming all over Times Square. This would be a bit dangerous. It's not an ordinary wasp. Each of them have magical powers. What the hell was it contaminated with? Suho didn't know what it meant, but it was a very ominous name. He hurriedly looked back at the hunters and shouted, "Everyone, beware. This is not an ordinary swarm of bees." The eyes of the hunters who raised their heads at those words widened. The Beiko Guild members, who have more developed senses than normal hunters, must have noticed it sooner than that, and immediately took countermeasures. Don't panic. It's just because there are so many of them, but after all, they're just flying insects. Block the approaching ones with your defense skill. Summoning hunters, intercept with flamethrowers. Yes, sir. Hunters grit their teeth and respond. Swoosh, swoosh. The flamethrowers hurriedly flew up. Whoa, this is the first time this has happened. They were busy dealing with the thorny vines rushing in, but suddenly wasps appeared. However, for Suho, who had been through all sorts of things in just 2 days, this wasn't particularly surprising. Swook. Suho calmly took out the twins' swords from his inventory. No one thought strangely about the sword that suddenly appeared in Suho's hand because everyone was busy. Even if there were people who saw it, it wouldn't be strange for a summoning hunter to summon something. After calmly observing the situation, Suho shouted at the other summoning hunters. Please detonate the flamethrowers in front of them all at once. What if they try to avoid it? Flamethrowers take time to be resummoned. It had to be used where it was possible. I will do something about it. All right. At Suho's confident words, they prepared to fire flamethrowers without a word. Since they had already seen Suho's ability, his words could not be taken lightly. Now! Numerous flamethrowers exploded in the air. Just as the wasps were about to scatter to avoid the explosion, use skill Storm Slash. Swish! The timely sword strike engulfed the red-hot explosions and wasps caused by the flamethrowers all at once. You have killed a contaminated wasp. You have killed a contaminated wasp. You have killed a contaminated wasp. Many of the wasps that had been coming in were turned to ashes and scattered. It worked. The hunters were delighted. However, the Beiko Guild members were surprised at what they witnessed, which was a lot different than what they knew. How could a summoning hunter use such a skill? The swordplay that Suho had just demonstrated was to the extent that even a mere combat-type hunter could not have done. Even if it were his skills, how could he have enough mana to use such a powerful skill while summoning those 20 mummies? In particular, Gudongjae's expression was hard to describe in words. What? Who the hell is that person? He felt like his wrists, which had received all of the treatment, were suddenly sore. Wing! But not all wasps died. Even after that, the wasps continued to flock from all sides and attacked the hunters. Eventually, the wasps hid themselves through the cracks of the woodvine's thorny vines. Then, the situation got even more complicated. Every time the hunters attacked woodvine, wasps came out silently from inside and started attacking. Sting. Ack! Gudongjae, who was fighting at the forefront, was stung on the back of his hand. At that moment, his arm stiffened, revealing the true effect of the contaminated wasp. His veins had turned green along the back of the hand and bulged as if they were going to burst. It was suspicious just by looking at it. He was then fed up with seeing his arm bulging, as if it was going to burst at any moment. Healer. Healer. It was too far to go back to where the healer was because he had to fight in the front line. Eventually, those green veins ate into his arms and then to his shoulders. Then, slash! Gu Dongjae's entire arm was cut off. Suho suddenly appeared and mercilessly cut off his arm. First aid. Ah! Damn it! What kind of first aid was that? Blood gushed out like a fountain from Dongjae's shoulder. Swish. You purchased item mummy bandage? Mummy bandage. Whirl. A white bandage flew from Suho's hand and wrapped around Gu Dongjae's shoulder. Whoop. It squeezed hard, and miraculously, the bleeding stopped quickly. Item effect is amazing. Now, the healer would take care of the rest. Suho could use a potion, but there was no time for that. Besides, the B-class healer from Baiko Guild would be able to regenerate even a severed arm. Also, Suho's gaze quickly examined Gu Dongjae's cut-off arm, an ominously dark green forearm. Explainer. Yes, from earlier, Beru had been staring at Gu Dongjae's forearm with an expression that seemed to know something. The Queen of Insects, Monarch of Plagues, had a similar ability. Perhaps it may have something to do with her. Suho looked at Beru and asked, "Didn't you say that the Queen of Insects also died in the war?" "Yes, the monarchs are all dead." "What is her name?" "Queen of Insects, Monarch of Plagues." Beru's eyes flashed and he answered immediately, "A very crazily strong woman." So, what kind of ability is it? It's the ability to inject poison into one's body and make it into a host for poisonous insects. Host? Parasitism. To put it nicely, it's just a zombie infested with maggots. However, when those maggots grow, they will be born again as poisonous insects. That's horrible. Suho raised his head and glared at the swarms of bees that continued to fly. He looked around again. The worst thing was that the area was gradually becoming a maze. Wood vines were just a small part of the brambles that covered Times Square. As the remaining countless vines wriggled and merged with each other, they turned into a tall and complicated thorn wall that began to separate the hunters. "It is dangerous to scatter. Come over here quickly." The hunters move in a hurry, shocked by the thorn wall that suddenly rose from the floor. The situation in the dungeon is getting more and more dire. Labyrinth. A living labyrinth emerged. The hunters would eventually get lost and scatter from each other. They never knew when that wall of thorns would suddenly turn into wood vines and attack them. In that complex labyrinth, the only one free from getting lost was those bees. Suho's first thought was correct. They have set foot in a huge beehive, the kingdom of bees. Suho suddenly thought of the ecology of bees. The bees were mostly workers who moved under orders, so that means there must be a main culprit behind them somewhere. "I think I know." Beru responded quickly to Suho's muttering. "Huh? How?" I could actually understand what they're saying. For some reason, Beru's antennae had been bobbing non-stop since earlier. Chapter 63, Chapter 62. Currently, the members of the Baiko Guild were genuinely perplexed. The reason they were put into that raid was to protect the C-class hunters from any possible attack by Lee Minseong. However, when they entered the field, an unexpected melee began. Wait, wasn't this a C-class field? There was no B in the information about this dungeon, was there? In a dungeon where one didn't know what would happen at any moment, the value of information is as important as life. That was one of the reasons why hunters prefer large guilds. And of course, the Baiko Guild, one of the representative large guilds, also had a lot of data on unexplored dungeons. In particular, field-type dungeons that existed outside the gate are free to be visited from time to time, so more detailed information such as the type of monsters that appear and the environment could be gathered. It was the same at Times Square Field. Because they knew in advance the information that the monsters there were woodvine, they went on with the raid with 2 experienced flamethrower summoning hunters. The flamethrower itself was not a summon that did great damage, but when it came to C-class summoning hunters, the number of summoned objects was quite a lot. It would boast great efficiency when dealing with plant-type monsters. In addition to that, as long as 3 B-class hunters were included, they couldn't even think of going through such trouble in a C-class field. If I had known in advance, I would have brought a mage hunter. If there had been a mage awakener with a flame skill, there would have been no suffering from wasps like that. Or not. Grumble. Skills like that are fine. Up ahead, the storm slash and flamethrowers' combined attack from Suho's twin sword were already showing tremendous synergy. The Baiko Guild members were at a loss for words as they saw the remains of the wasps flying around as ashes in the air. What is that person really? He was too good at fighting to be a rookie who has only awakened for less than a month. Suho naturally treats the summoning hunters who are much older than him as if they were his subordinates. In addition, he was giving proper instructions to other hunters. Leave the bees to us. Take care of the thorns. My mummies will do the tanking, so the dealers focus only on the attack. Tanks, stay in front of the dealers. Got it. All right. Hunters move in perfect order at Suho's command. The battle line, which had been disorganized for a while, was quickly put back together. Gu Dongjae, who was the attack leader, was in an awkward position. Suho found him just standing there. What are you doing here? Move out of the way and get your arm treated. Yes! Gu Dongjae hurriedly ran toward the healer, startled at Suho's screams. The healer of the Baiko Guild treated Gu Dongjae and looked at Suho's dependable back with a strange expression. It was this team I was most worried about, but things were going better than he expected, thanks to that one rookie hunter named Sung Suho. The only problem was that the dungeon seemed to be thinking the same thing. Swoosh! Suddenly, thorny vines from the walls and floor began to entangle with each other and separate the hunters. It was also a phenomenon that did not exist in the information book of the Baiko Guild. It is dangerous to scatter around. Come over here quickly. The hunters move in a hurry, perplexed by the thorn wall that suddenly rose from the floor. The problem was Suho. A wall of thorns swirled in front of Suho, who had been so far away from them, completely separating him from the place where other hunters gathered. No! The urgent cries of the hunters, who were suddenly separated from Suho, gradually drifted away. Slash! Suho swung his twin swords and mercilessly sliced the thorny wall, but the vines next to him crawled through the gap and filled it up again in an instant. Suho muttered with an expression that he did not like it. Isn't it obvious that it was only Trey, Ying to get rid of me? It is. So what are they saying? Nod. When Suho looked at Beru, he was still waving his antennae while looking at the wasps floating in the air. Oh! Beru nodded as if realizing something, then finally opened his mouth. Seems to be swearing at me, saying they're going to kill me. When Suho's expression cooled down, Beru continued with a chuckle. Still, I overheard all the words exchanged between them. Beru's narrowly opened eyes stared somewhere. It's over there. Let's go. Suho turns around without hesitation. He would know what was waiting for him if he met it in person. Then, the wall of thorns spread out in front of Suho to the left and right, and a path that had not existed was created. Suho grinned and showed his teeth fiercely. I guess it's waiting for me over there, too. It's a very cheeky bug. Beru's expression was much more ferocious than Suho's. Suho ran forward along the road without hesitation. Thud. It's an interesting one. Suho smirked when he saw the demon waiting for him at the end of the labyrinth. A bizarre form that looks like a mixture of an insect and a person. A humanoid monster armed with yellow and black armor was standing there. A spearman? Is that a bee sting? Instead of hands, long, pointed spears were sticking out as his arms. Kirk! Yes, I am a lancer who serves the great queen. Flap. The spearman spread his wings wide and flew up. At that moment, Beru suddenly muttered something interesting next to Suho. It's a mysterious insect, speaking like a human. Why are you looking at me like that, young master? Suho looked at Beru in silence for a moment, then looked away again. There's a lot to say, but he just let it go. Suho glared at the spearman again and asked, So why did you invite me? Kirk, it's just that you've been a bit of a nuisance, so I've locked you up. You know, it's an honor as the Queen's Lancer to have to deal with you myself. Swish. The Lancer crossed his pointy arms, or spears, and glared arrogantly at Suho. Suho smiled softly. Lock up, me? Suho's smile grew wider, thinking it was absurd. The more he does, the more and more his shadow spreads in all directions. You must be the one who's trapped. The shadow mummies, who had returned to the shadows of Suho before they knew it, rose up at the same time. 10 mummies at where the hunters were. The other 10 were right there. Even at the moment when they were separated by the labyrinth, Suho was calmly adjusting his troops according to the situation. However, the spearman who was suddenly besieged by the shadow mummies did not look surprised at all. On the contrary, he even laughed at Suho, as if it was some kind of a joke. "Kirk, you're doing well with your summoning hunter agenda. I am well aware of your weakness. I was once a hunter too." "Once a hunter?" At the last words, Suho reminded him of something. Flap! The lancer's wings shook quickly, and he disappeared on the spot. "He's coming! Swish! Kia!" He was fast. In a blink of an eye, the spearman broke through the shadow mummies and rushed straight toward Suho. A summoning hunter's weakness is someone of his kind. He was once a hunter. Suho chewed on those words and twisted his body slightly to avoid the attack. Swish! A spear like an awl glided past Suho and pierced a huge hole in the thorn wall behind him. Truly, a formidable attack. At least C-class or more. The aura Suho felt from him was C-class. However, his speed was comparable to that of a B-class, and when his other skills were to be added, it was truly powerful. Kirk! Pretty good! Keep struggling! Swish! 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 Incredible attack speed. In the blink of an eye, countless straight attacks were poured into Suho. All of those attacks were aimed at Suho's blind spot, and the speed was so fast that it felt like numerous enemies were attacking at the same time. An infinite hell, where space itself seems to be hacked to pieces. At the center, Suho was silently avoiding the attacks by a narrow margin rather than counterattacking. His eyes followed every movement. Then all of a sudden, "He's a really interesting guy. I know how to deal with witchcraft." Suho smirked as he spoke to him. "If you pretend to be a great one, the opponents will usually die out of recklessness, right?" Kirk. At those words, the lancer stood still in the air. A cruel smile crept across his lips. "They said you were a rookie with no experience, but you're a quick-witted one." Indeed, a voice came from a different direction. Suddenly, Suho was surrounded by 5 spearmen. Each one has a slightly different appearance, but all of them look like a mixture of insects and people. They were armed with full body armor and pointed spears resembling bee stings. Even if you notice, nothing will change. The spearmen flew at the same time and charged at Suho. But in fact, Suho was also quite confident in speed battles. Blessing. Gray. Swoosh. Suho's hair turned silver. Thud. Suho's new appearance disappeared on the spot and appeared in front of the spearman with his twin swords. Slash! Behind him, a spearman stood with his head separated without any apparent death. Blag, you have killed a contaminated lancer. 4 remaining. In the eyes of the lancers, who are shocked at the sight of their colleague's head rolling on the floor in vain, Suho's figure disappeared again. Slash! Another head rolled across the floor. You have killed a contaminated lancer. Now 3. Only then did the relaxed expression of the lancers suddenly change. A hunter evolved his body to increase his attack power? What was that? Suho had also been concentrating all his remaining stats obtained as rewards only on his strength. As a result, Suho's movement with the addition of the blessing were not at the level of a mere flying insect. Don't worry, Suho smiled at them. I'll save one. Whether it was the king or queen of insects, one has to take the position. Chapter 64. Chapter 63. What did you just say? Lim Taegu, the guild leader of the Reaper Guild, doubted his ears. The guys are missing? Yes, sir. To be exact, they continue to disappear even now. Are you sure they're really missing, not just cooling down somewhere after drinking? Yes, sir. I think they were kidnapped. Does it make sense that hunters are kidnapped? It was absurd. It couldn't be that all of the guild members who had been suddenly out of touch for the past few days had been kidnapped. But Secretary O's expression was serious. At first, I had no idea, but I got a CCTV video from the planning office a while ago. Looking at this, as Lim Taegu received the USB that Secretary O had given him and plugged it into his computer, his expression was already hardening. The fact that something like a video file could be sent via email or online, but it was delivered via USB, means it was something very confidential. Recently, there was only one issue within the guild. Vice President Lee Min-seong, who became a villain and went into hiding. Don't tell me. Now, because of that one guy, the image of the Reaper Guild in Korea has completely fallen to the ground. No matter how much they explained saying that they didn't know, people couldn't believe it easily. The Hunter Association also continued to pressure them, saying that there must be someone Lee Min-sung conspired with in the guild. Damn it. When Secretary Oh played the video, Lim Tae-gyu's expression hardened. In the video, one of the Reaper Guild members was standing on the street. Then suddenly, with a swish, someone snatched his body quickly. Click. Secretary Oh pressed the spacebar to pause it, but the face of the one who snatched the guild member was faintly visible. The picture quality was a bit low, but there was no way Lim Tae-gyu, who had known Lee Min-sung for a long time, could not recognize his face. In an instant, a lump of mixed emotions welled up in his heart. Lee Min-sung, this bastard is really... Blag! He slammed his fist and the desk split in two. Surprised, Secretary Oh hurriedly stepped back. He assisted Lim Tae-gyu for a considerable amount of time, but it was the first time he had seen him like that, to the extent where Lim Tae-gyu was genuinely angry. Ha! Min-sung! Lim Tae-gyu let out a deep sigh as he leaned back on the president's chair. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling flickered. Why did you really become like this? As president and vice president, apart from Guild High School and Hunter High School, Lee Min-sung was an old friend of his anyway. He was a friend Lim Tae-gyu was proud of. Min-sung was someone who always shone ever since he was young. At one point, Tae-gyu was really proud to be his friend, before the cataclysm, even when Tae-gyu was asked to be his driver. The reason why he readily accepted the offer was because he enjoyed hanging out with him in the first place. Tae-gyu, be my driver. What? All of a sudden? We meet and hang out every day anyway. If you get behind the wheel, we can still play together while working, right? Well, that's right. Will you pay for my salary then? I'll give you more than what the manager receives. Besides, I always pay for our drinks. Might as well just keep your money and buy a house. The reason why Lee Min-sung made Lim Tae-gyu a driver rather than a manager was that a manager would not have time to hang out because he'd have a lot of work. After that, everything became really fun. He followed Lee Min-sung, who was a movie star, touring the filming set, and eventually married an actress he met through Min-sung's introduction. At that time, Lee Min-sung and himself were truly close friends. Since when did it get so twisted? Really? What happened? No, I actually knew. I've been pretending not to know. Lim Tae-gyu remembered that moment clearly, after the world suddenly changed in a cataclysm, after he suddenly awakened as an S-class hunter. The day I bought alcohol for the first time. With the first nay he earned after becoming a hunter. The moment an enormous amount of money was deposited into his bank account, the first thing he did was to buy a drink to a friend he was grateful for buying him a drink and meal every time. Hey, I'll pick up the tab today. What? I'm sorry that I've been on the receiving end all the time. From now on, I will buy you meals and drinks too. There was an awkward expression on Lee Min-sung's face at that time. He still didn't know what the feeling was. But it was from that day that Lee Min-sung began to change gradually. When Lee Min-sung awakened as an A-class hunter one level lower than himself, Min-sung then really has become like a different person. As if all of the friendships that had been built over the years were gone, he suddenly began to express a tremendous sense of inferiority. Why would he, when he still has a lot of things? They said the human heart is something you really wouldn't understand. Lim Tae-gyu had never once accepted the fact that he had become an S-class hunter as luck. Luck and misfortune are the reverse side of the coin. It was supposed to be a day full of luck. He was fortunate enough to be gifted with magic and became an S-class awakener, but his wife, who was by his side, was enveloped in blue mist and turned into mistburn. And he attacked his only son. The day of his awakening, that supposedly very lucky day, Lim Tae-gyu eventually had to kill his beloved wife, or something that was his wife, with that power, the very day he lost everything. At that time, the only friend who remained by the side was Lee Min-sung. Ha, really, how did it come to this? Lim Tae-gyu pressed his thumb through his throbbing head and gritted his teeth. Next to the smashed desk, on the other side of the monitor, he stared intently at Lee Min-sung's face. His demon-like expression, clearly visible even in his hazy appearance, had no gleam like before. Secretary Oh shuddered at the cold voice that flowed from Lim Tae-gyu's mouth. What do you think is the reason Lee Min-sung kidnapped our guild members? Could it be revenge? After the incident broke out, we lost Vice President Lee Min-sung first. No, if revenge was the purpose, it would be enough to just kill them. There was no reason for a kidnap. In fact, Lee Min-sung was raiding hunters who were not members of the Reaper Guild these days, and they were all killed on the spot. Come to think of it, there was something like insect wings attached to Lee Min-sung's back, which was filmed on CCTV. According to experts' analysis, its wings are most similar to those of bees among insects. Lim Taegyu thought about bees. Bees are insects that live in groups. Could it be that the purpose of the kidnapping is to increase allies, getting the same punishment as himself? What? I had never heard of such a skill before. Secretary O shakes his head wide-eyed, saying that it was nonsense. Who knows? That greedy guy might have bought a runestone with a mysterious skill for a large sum of money. Stand. Lim Taegyu, who organized his thoughts for a moment, suddenly stood up from his seat. Tell the planning team, from now on, find a dungeon where bees can live. Dungeon? That's right. After all, the only place a villain can hide in this small country is a dungeon. Yes, I will immediately relay this. Huh? Where are you going all of a sudden? The weapon room. Secretary O was taken aback by Lim Taegyu's actions as he walked out of the office immediately after giving the order. Tremendous speculation was welling as he headed toward the weapons room. The S-class hunter, engulfed in anger, started moving. Meanwhile, Suho was holding the throat of the last remaining lancer. Ack! Fear filled the face of the lancer, struggling with his leg as he clung to Suho's hand. Let me ask one thing. Suho looked him straight in the eyes and asked, Where is your master? Kirk! The lancer, who struggled in Suho's hand, fiercely exposed his teeth while breathing heavily. If you two meet, even you won't be safe. That's for me to handle. Where is your master? Kirk, I don't think I can. If you don't want to say it, then don't. Slash! Suho mercilessly cut his neck. You have killed a contaminated lancer. Your level increased. Thud. Suho opened his mouth to the corpse of the lancer lying on the floor. I can just ask your shadow. He looked at the black smoke that slowly rose from the corpses of the lancers lying around. Shadow release is possible on this target. Shadow release is possible on this target. Shadow release is possible on this target. Suho stretched out his hand toward the shadows of the lancer and released 5 shadows. Arise! Kia! At that moment, screams of pain from the lancers resonated in all directions. Soon the shadows rose. Swook! Their legs began to crawl out of the shadows, then pulled themselves up. Ring. Shadow release succeeded. Shadow release succeeded. Great. New allies. Suho looked at the new shadow soldiers standing in front of him with a satisfied expression. General class. General class. Now I'm going to ask. Every single thing. The 5 shadow lancers knelt down with utmost respect. Where is your former master? Every single thing. They all pointed their spears at the floor. Under? Hiding in the basement? A small smile appeared on Suho's lips. Right then, slash! Just in time, new lancers were flocking over Suho's head. There are dozens of them. Young master, these 5 guys must have been just the first soldiers. Beru was making a fuss, but for some reason, the corner of his mouth was going up. The more the better. Suho also smiled faintly and raised his head to look at them. Kirk! On the other hand, the newly arrived lancers couldn't help but panic. Down there, shadow lancers who looked just like them, but with black steam, stood guarding Suho. The little ant, Beru, towering over the top of their heads. Welcome, my new subordinates. He was giggling with the most evil laughter. Chapter 65. Chapter 64. Wing! Dozens of contaminated lancers immediately launched an attack. Kirk, attack! They're outnumbered. Do not let those who dare betray the queen live. They were the first to be killed by Suho's hands. They underestimated Suho and let their guards down. However, things were now completely different. General class. The black lancers were reborn as shadow lancers. 5 lancers who looked just like themselves, but with different colors, turned to Suho's side, so they couldn't be careless. Struggle as much as you like. In the center of them, Suho's eyes shone intensely. I will make you betray your queen soon. The black lancers who served their new king jumped forward, crossing two spears. We slash! At the end of the labyrinth, the army of Suho and the contaminated lancers clash. Horrible shockwaves exploded in all directions at a tremendous sense of speed. Horrible cries of similar voices echoed through the air. The thorny walls caught in the aftermath repeatedly collapsed and built countless times. New thorny vines continued to surround Suho's army. When beings of similar powers collided, the scene was indescribably horrendous and devastating. Krk! The Lancers, who were born solely to attack, had no concept of defense in the first place. They just had one spear, or rather, two spears, that pierced the enemies and slaughtered them. A two-edged sword, where if they were faster than their opponent, they'd win, but if they fell behind, they would lose their lives. But Shadow Lancers were different. They evolved into extreme forms from only knowing how to attack to being able to defend as well. To be more precise, they became immortal Lancers that could be restored even if they were killed, as long as Suho's mana backed them up. Swoosh! The hole punched through the Lancers was filled with a black shadow, and their head that fell off came flying back and attached again. As the battle continued, the contaminated Lancers couldn't help but be astonished. What is this? Contaminated wasps wandering over the Times Square field convey all the words and actions of the hunters entering the place to the Lancers through close signals with each other. Thanks to that, the Lancers were able to grasp Suho's moves in advance. No, they thought they figured him out. He had quite a bit of skill in summoning somewhat unusual allies, but even so, he was a rookie who had only been awakened for less than a month. They thought that if he would be thrown into an unexpected situation, his limitations would soon unfold due to lack of experience, and then he would just surrender. They were so sure about that. Kirk! All day, Suho has only been told that he is a newbie who has only been an awakener for less than a month. Little they know, he had been through more actual battles than anyone else, so he knew very well how to use his skills most effectively. His strategy was extremely simple. Take one first, no matter what. The first 5 Shadow Lancers attacked the enemies at the same time. Swoosh! Since it was an attack at the expense of defense, Suho's Lancers could not be safe. But what they got in return was great. You have killed a contaminated Lancer. Arise! Swoosh! Shadow release succeeded. The 6th soldier was born and stood up in front of Suho. 6 now. The 6 shadow soldiers again attacked at once in search of a new prey. Kirk, you have killed a contaminated Lancer. Another one. 7. Another one. 8. You have killed a contaminated Lancer. You have killed a contaminated Lancer. Shadow release succeeded. Kirk! Stop saying arise! Thud. As they continued to increase one by one, the number of Shadow Lancers that Suho commanded before he knew it were 15. Kirk! The Lancers looked around and were surprised. Suddenly, the number of black Lancers surrounding them became equal to their number. The largest and most powerful knight who was leading the contaminated Lancers glared at Suho and gritted his teeth. Kirk, you are one who uses strange skills. However, the meaning was slightly different from the first. How can you command bugs so easily? Could it be that you came for the relic too? Relic? Kirk, shameless, how dare you make a fuss? Suho was genuinely puzzled. A relic? What relic? Oh, don't tell me. At that moment, he suddenly remembered the name he had heard from Beru. Queen of Insects, Monarch of Plagues, Croatia. Are you talking about a relic of Croatia? Kirk, if you even know her name, you must have come to know everything. Do you want to become a queen bee too? No. Why would I? It was just an accusation, but Suho felt a little unfair. Also, a queen? Didn't he look like a male? Anyway, it would have been nice to use the information he got for free. Where is the relic of Croatia, be it the queen or whatever? Does your queen has it? Kirk! Of course. How dare you question that? Other than our queen, who else would dare to inherit the legacy of Croatia? Oh, you must have been a loyal server. Beru giggled. Like most insects, bees and ants have many similarities. A society that centered around the queen, like the faithful workers who gathered food at the behest of the queen, even in face of death. But to Beru, the existence of a queen had a slightly different meaning. Although Beru was born from a queen ant, he was born as a king rather than a worker. He was not one of the insignificant workers loyal to the queen, but a true king of ants who could stand tall above the queen. Although now he has been serving his great and noble king, Sung Jinwoo. Beru was still clearly aware of the fact that he was the king of the ants. The worker bees who are only loyal to the queen bee couldn't help but feel insignificant. Or was that so? Beru had been floating in the air, watching and playing, even before the start of the battle. However, none of the contaminated lancers dared to approach such a defenseless and weak presence. The survival instinct unique to bugs made them feel like something sinister would happen if they accidentally touched Beru. Young Master. When Beru approached Suho, all the lancers suddenly trembled and stood stiff on the spot. Beru had been stealing information from the wasps roaming around the area with his antennae. It seems that the hunters on the other side are in danger. The maximum number of soldiers Suho could extract is 20. Half of them had been guarding the hunters from earlier. However, since Suho extracted new soldiers on his side, the number of shadow mummies over there was decreasing one by one. That wasn't the only problem. Swoosh. Suho had also noticed from a while ago, a hazy green mist was coming out from the thorny vines that covered the complicated labyrinth. Paralysis poison nested in those thorns. The poison had fused with the blue mist that permeated the entire field and was spreading all over Times Square. Sniff. In the end, the green mist poisoned Suho's body as he breathed. Ring! A system message appeared in front of Suho. A harmful substance has been detected. The detoxification begins with the effect of blessing great spellcaster Kandiaru's protection. 3, 2, 1. Antidote is complete. The effect is good. It was time to say a silent prayer of gratitude to the great spellcaster Kandiaru. However, unlike himself, the poison mist would be very lethal to other hunters. I'll have to stop there for a bit before going to the queen bee. It was fortunate that gas masks were also being sold in the shop window. It's not a great item, so the price was cheap. For the gold, the corpses of the monsters there, if sold, would be enough. Kirk? The lancers were greatly taken aback by the sight of Suho still moving casually despite inhaling the poison mist. How did you? They aimed their spears at Suho with confidence. What kind of relationship do you have with Queresh, the monarch of plagues? We don't know each other. So awkward. Regardless of Suho's intentions, the misunderstanding gradually deepened. People shouldn't be judged by their appearance, but in the first place, those people weren't intelligent-looking either. No, they weren't even humans. Beru was clever enough to deliberately spur on their misunderstanding. Kah! So what if they are connected? None of your deadly poison will work on Young Master anyway. Ye Young Master? Did you have another relic? They thought that there might be other relics besides the one their queen had. How on earth did a mere human get hold of the Plague Monarch's relic? But the human in front of them was already showing something beyond imagination. A newbie who has only been awakened for a month? No way. If that's true, they can't be so unilaterally beaten by a C-class summoning hunter. The answer was simple. He had been hiding his identity and power from the start. The Lancers came to a conclusion and glared at Suho fiercely. They began to gather all their strength in their whole body. Kirk! Now that it has become this way, even at the cost of our lives, we must. If a human got hold of another relic, he had to be killed somehow. If they let him live, it will be a huge stumbling block to their queen who wants to become a monarch. You, even the hunters who came with you. Everybody will die! Wing! The Lancers were more focused than ever. They risked their lives to attack Suho, and, boom, the Lancers' eyes widened. Beyond the poison mist that was so terrible that they couldn't see, the tips of their spears, to which they had put their lives on, were blocked by a solid barrier. What? With unfinished thought in mind, the Lancers lost consciousness. Meanwhile, the hunters who came in with Suho were in danger. Cough, cough! My body is starting to feel. There was no way to escape the poison mist. If they had known that poison mist existed there in the first place, they would have brought a gas mask. Everything wasn't anticipated. They were too careless about the situation where there were 3 B-class hunters in a C-class dungeon. Hold on. I already contacted the guild. Right then, Baiko Guild's reinforcements arrived at Times Square Field. Is it here? Baek Miho, who looked at the situation inside, frowned with a serious expression. Chapter 66, Chapter 65. Throughout the entire day, Baek Miho stayed with the guild and regularly monitored the situation of the guild members. Among field-type dungeons located in the city center, there are quite a few places where cell phones catch signals. There were many cases where the signal could not be caught due to thick blue mist. The guild avoided opening such dungeons to the C-class hunters today as much as possible. Vice President, I got a call from Times Square. Is it about Lee Min-sung? They said it is not yet certain. However, there are occurrences that were not in the guild data. Not in the data? Baek Miho's expression stiffened at the employee's report. The information power of the Baiko Guild was unmatched. In particular, the fields open to the C-class hunters today were only those that had been verified several times. What happened that was not in the data? On top of that, it was coincidentally when a villain was on rampage. Baek Miho's eyes flashed sharply. What kind of phenomenon is it? That is poison mist and bees. Bees. That one word was enough. The appearance of Lee Min-sung in the CCTV video where he changed into a form similar to a bee. Whether it's a skill or what, if a bee suddenly appeared in the field, it would have something to do with Lee Min-sung in some way. Let's start with Times Square. The guild members who were waiting for Baek Miho's order stood up all at once. They arrived at Times Square right away and held their breath the moment they entered the field. Ha! A labyrinth of thorns covered with poison mist. I never thought the poison would be this terrible. Hunters have much better resistance to poison than normal people. Some kind of poison didn't work to begin with. Even if they were poisoned, they could be treated by healers, so they were rarely in danger due to poison. However, if an entire field was filled with a thick poison mist, it would be a different thing. As long as the mana of the healers is limited, it is inevitable that they will eventually reach a situation where they cannot use the detoxification skill. Everyone, wear a gas mask. Each and every one. At Baek Miho's instructions, they put on the gas mask the subordinate hunters had brought. The moment when Baek Miho herself puts a gas mask on her face. Wing snatch! Baek Miho's hand quickly grabbed something. It was a contaminated wasp that had hidden in the poisonous mist and approached like an assassin. Baek Miho saw the wasp's tail and the poisonous substance at the tip of its stinger. It was an insect-type demon imbued with magical power. Even in such a terrible poison mist, it was a poisonous insect that could fly around intact. She was worried about the safety of the hunters who entered earlier. Vice President. Baiko Guild members looked at Baek Miho with blurred expressions. Survivors, we have to find them no matter what. Baek Miho gritted her teeth and walked toward the labyrinth of thorns covered with thick poison mist. I have to save them somehow. Not all good intentions come back with good results every time. It was Baek Miho herself who drove them here. If someone did die, it was entirely her responsibility. Please, I hope it's not too late. However. Huh? Ah, they found them sooner than expected. Vice President Baek Miho, they're alive! Here. Baek Miho was a little bewildered when she found the hunters resting together in one place. Contrary to her concerns, they looked unharmed, although their appearance itself was scruffy and it showed that they had suffered quite a bit. Thanks to the healer she sent with them, all of their injuries were treated. Most of all, Baek Miho was surprised by the gas masks they were wearing. How did you manage to have a gas mask? There was no information about poison in that dungeon, so there was no reason to bring a gas mask. But somehow, they were all wearing gas masks. Oh, this, Hunter Sung Suho brought them. Sung Suho. Baek Miho's gaze moved to Fef. In Suho, but he's nowhere to be found. There were only 9 out of the 10 hunters that were sent there. Everyone was safe, but only one C-class hunter named Sung Suho was missing. Where is he? Don't tell me. Oh no, Hunter Sung Suho is safe. He'll be fine. When Baek Miho was about to ask if he was dead, the hunters answered urgently. However, each of their expressions was a little strange. Baek Miho, who noticed that, looked at the Baiko Guild members. What the hell happened here? Vice President, that's... Hunter Sung Suho saved us. What, saved you? Who saved who? What does that mean? A C-class hunter saved a group of raiders that included 3 B-class hunters. However, when asked again, the answer remained the same. He disappeared after saving us. He even gave us gas masks from where he could have gotten them. The hunters who were gathered there just a moment ago were almost at the brink of death. The poison mist that was scattered all over the field made their body harden. Thorned scarecrow woodvine still kept coming from all directions. Meanwhile, the contaminated wasps that appeared silently when they saw free space used bee sting. None of them were negligible enemies, but the scariest thing was the poison sting of a wasp. Regardless if only one's limbs were stung, the poison consumed the whole body in an instant, causing it to rot. There was only one treatment method: to cut off the poisoned part as quickly as possible, just as Suho did to Gu Dongjae. Immediately after that, the only way to regenerate the part that was cut off was for the healer to regenerate it. However, such treatment consumed too much of the healer's mana, so it was impossible to use it consecutively. Suho had been separated from them due to the suddenly rising thorn wall. But the thing was, Suho's appearance. You said his hair was bleached? Yes, in silver gray. Baek Miho's expression hardened as she listened to the explanation. As far as she knew, there were not many skills that changed hair color suddenly. The most famous of them was the Beast Transformation skill. If one used the Beast Transformation skill, it would be possible to change a body part or even more. Could that hunter named Sung Suho also have a Beast Transformation skill? Ah, come to think of it, even then. Why did I just think of it now? Baek Miho suddenly recalled a memory from a while back. She thought he looked familiar. It turns out, today wasn't the first time she saw Suho. Magok Field. It would not be an exaggeration to say that almost all beast hunters in the metropolitan area gathered at Magok Field, that strange dungeon where the king of beasts was chosen. Hunter Sung Suho was there too. Unlike the others, the hunter who gave off a strange smell, and the only one who caught her eye was the Suho. It was a place where only beast hunters gathered, so for sure, he also. It seemed certain that the Sung Suho had the beast transformation skill. But why? For some reason, another thought popped up in Baek Miho's head. Coincidentally, besides herself and her father, there was one more famous person with silver gray hair. An unidentified hunter who is making a name for himself these days. Beast King Crow. She didn't know what the story was, but that person who always hides his face with a mask. Wait, now is not the time for this. Baek Miho, who was lost in thought, suddenly came to her senses. She then asked the guild members who were waiting for his orders. So how did the hunter disappear again? Where did he go? He said he was going to the place where the queen bee is. The queen bee? Something was going strangely wrong. An unexpected situation happened, and the cause was not the A-class villain Lee Minseong, but the queen bee. That dungeon was a place where there were no boss mobs. How come there was a new boss mob suddenly? Was it by chance Lee Minseong? Confirmed from the CCTV footage, he had something like insect wings attached to his back. Regardless of what skill it was, if all of this was done by Lee Minseong, it would make sense. A hunter, who was talking to Baek Miho, pointed to one side with his finger. There were stairs going down to the basement. That was where Hunter Sung Suho went down to. So that means that Queen Bee is underground. Baek Miho nodded with a stern expression. It seemed that the situation would become clear only after going downstairs. She looked back at the reinforcements she had brought and ordered them. Some of you evacuate these people outside, and the rest will go with me to catch the Queen Bee. At that time, Suho went down the stairs to the basement of Times Square. Is it you? It felt like the air around the area stopped at that cold word. 20 black lancers rose from Suho's shadow all at once. The shadow lancers took a stance as if they would charge forward at any moment. However, despite such a hideous sight, she did not lose her composure. She sat cross-legged in front of a table in a cafe entwined with thorns and lazily tilted her teacup. Would you like to sit down for a while? A clear and calm voice handed over an empty seat to Suho. Sure. Suho sat on the chair in front of her. Then in that threatening atmosphere, it became quiet. Would you like a cup of tea? It's sweet honey tea. It is also a tea with special honey made by myself. How dare a flying insect offer? Beru suddenly thrust his face in and let out a ferocious roar. Although he was still as big as a fist, the woman was genuinely surprised by that. Oh my goodness, now I see that you have a great bodyguard? I'm not great. Beru crossed his arms with an air of pride at those words. The woman could not take her eyes off Beru's appearance. An ant the size of a fist whose body glows with black steam. However, the strength of bugs is independent of their size. Rather, it was a world where one should not be ignored, the smaller and weaker it looked. He is the first bug I saw next to Quretia that has this kind of presence. The woman was confused. Beru's aura was very strange. His presence was obviously enormous, but he could feel the instability in the energy flowing out. What are you guys doing? Blind date? Watching the two stare at each other with strange eyes, Suho smirks with a mocking expression. The woman who came to her senses suddenly greeted Suho politely. Oh, sorry. My name is Arsha. May I ask your name? Sung Suho. Then I will call you Mr. Suho. Miss, yes, if I act arrogantly, I think I will be scolded by this ant. Kem, you have a good eye when it comes to insects, Beru said with the most evil expression on his face. Chapter 67, Chapter 66. Are you the queen bee? Arsha smiled and nodded. Yes, I am the queen bee you were looking for. What's your relationship with Quretia? She smiled at Suho's direct question. You know the monarch well. Let's say it's just like how you are the Fang monarch's descendant. Oh my. What's with that look on your face? You smell like an animal all over your body. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I am not stupid. For a moment, Suho was at a loss for words at Arsha's meaningful gaze. Swoosh. Just in time, a divine wind swept through Suho's pure white hair. The king of beasts, Fang monarch, grabs his belly and thumps on the floor, laughing at the queen bee. The real descendant of the Fang monarch has now possessed Suho's body. By the way, it's a bit disappointing that the descendant of the Fang monarch took away the worker bees I worked so hard for. Could it be the power of the Fang monarch, the famous contempt for the weak? Overpowering beasts weaker than himself, right? No, it was all wrong. None of them fit. Why did she keep talking nonsense with that expression? The king of beasts, Fang monarch, grabs his stomach and thumps again. Stop laughing. It was just a lack of information. She's probably not that stupid. Suho didn't know why, but he felt embarrassed for her, so he made an excuse for Arsha instead. It is natural to misunderstand. Just in time, Beru delivered a message directly into Suho's head so Arsha couldn't hear it. As I said before, in order for a descendant of a monarch to exist, the monarch must die first to create that vacancy. But the victor of the war, the shadow monarch, is still alive. That means no one will think of me as a descendant of the shadow monarch. It's actually like that. Although Beru had always called Suho young master, strictly speaking, he is only the son of the shadow monarch and not the official successor. In the first place, a descendant of the shadow monarch could not exist in the world, because Sung Jinwoo, the ruler of death, will never die. The clear evidence of that was Suho's status window. Name, Sung Suho, level 28, occupation, none. If Suho was the official successor, there was no way that the occupation column would remain blank. There was more evidence, those shadow soldiers standing firmly behind Suho. Since Suho was not a monarch, he could not command an entire army. So at best, he could only release shadow soldiers for his daily tasks. After a day, they would go back to nothing. There was no need to explain those to Arsha. It was normal to see her misleading herself. Let's see how it turns out. Suho asked Arsha a question instead of an answer. So you're saying you're a descendant of Quretia? Well, in fact, all of us bugs are her descendants. Quretia is one and a colony. She is the mother of all bugs. If you turn your back, you will die. Actually, the words are being twisted, young master. Suho ignored Beru's whispers for a moment. Oh my goodness, so scary. As Suho's sharp gaze, Arsha raised both hands in an exaggerated gesture of surrender. Then, an amazing sight unfolded. Wing. Arsha's hands were split into numerous bees and scattered. How dare you? Beru's hand, furious at the moment, quickly wafted through the air. That caused several small bees to land on the table. The remaining bees coalesced back to Arsha and turned into hands again. Beru's eyes squinted. It's something that weak bugs often do to protect themselves. Is that the basis of the struggle to survive? Where's the main body? Oh, you're not surprised at all. Even in that situation, Suho remained calm. He too. I couldn't see the name tag from the beginning. Instead of the name Arsha, Suho saw something else. There were name tags of the numerous contaminated wasps that have gathered around Arsha's body. Yes, that's right. I left for here right away. One of the worker bees I worked hard to raise rebelled against me and decided to move the hive. Worker? Could it be? Correct. Vice President Lee Min-song, who is a hot issue these days. Arsha answers with a small sigh. Her gaze suddenly turned to the shadow lancers standing behind Suho. You know what? Those lancers were once human too. I fed royal jelly to the men who came to Earth and approached me with a dark heart, and they evolved into worker bees. Royal jelly? What is that? It is the power of the queen bee. The queen bee Arsha had poison that she had in her body since she was born. A special poison named royal jelly. The poison is sweet like honey, but the moment it enters the body of the host, it transforms the host into a loyal worker bee that only follows the queen bee. However, the conditions for making them worker bees are quite difficult. Condition? Yes. Those who cannot withstand the toxicity of royal jelly die immediately, and those who have some degree of immunity rot alive. Rot. Is it like the arm of Gudongjae? I did a good job cutting it right away. Accordingly, catching just anyone and feeding them royal jelly did not mean that all of them would evolve into worker bees. At first, Arsha also had to go through a lot of trial and error. So I set up a bar and kept feeding royal jelly to random people. Then I just knew. Those who meekly accepted the power of the queen bee and willingly gave up on humans to become worker bees. They had one thing in common. Craving. Arsha's eyes glimmered. People who have stronger desires than others give up being human very easily. Every human being has desires. However, the amount of the desire was different for each person, and the types were diverse. Among them, especially those who have strong desire, i.e., hunter. So, among the hunters, I found those who were not satisfied with their strength and wanted to become stronger somehow. Oh, they were easy to find. When I threw the bait, they came on their own. Suho immediately realized what that method was. Stardust. That's right. If you fed royal jelly to hunters who used stardust, the healthiest worker bees were born. Coincidentally, Vice President Lee Min-seong also distributed stardust. Looking back, Lee Min-seong was a good worker for Arsha in many ways. Even when he was human, he was very helpful. But in fact, the thing she looked forward to the most was when he became a real worker bee. He was a person who aspired to become an S-class, even though he had the strength of an A-class. So I really put a lot of effort into raising him. If he was unqualified, he would die, so he spent time and adapted to royal jelly little by little, like a vaccine. A small amount of poison was fed daily. But I guess he ate too much. The vaccine was too strong. He ended up running away from me. He ran away? Beru was the first to react to those words. A worker bee running away from the queen bee? For an ant serving a great king, it was an act that could not be dared to imagine. Yes, he became a worker bee, but a kind worker bee that was born and refused to become a worker of the queen. Arsha let out a deep sigh with a really embarrassed expression. Maybe he even wants to imitate me, so he started gathering his own legion. On the subject of failure. Legion. Suho's expression stiffened at that familiar yet ominous word. Outside Times Square, unusual signs were happening all over the city. Did he drink too much? Citizens whispered as they watched a passerby clutching his throbbing head while staggering. Why is that person like that? I don't know. He's a hunter, right? He's wearing armor. Hey, let's avoid getting involved in trouble for nothing. Among the hunters, there were often such people. Those who suddenly awakened as high-ranking hunters became wealthy overnight and lost control. If civilian people were involved with them, their lives could be really in danger with no exaggeration. People whispered and secretly began to distance themselves from the hunter. Right then, the hunter, who was walking in a strange posture, turned his head toward the people. Chills. A rotting face like a corpse was exposed. The complexion of the people who saw it quickly became pale. Eventually, the hunter's mouth opened wide and he attacked the citizens. Jah! Jag! Monster! Screams spread like flames at the sudden appearance of a humanoid monster. But screams were coming from other alleys as well. It wasn't just one guy. The association has an emergency. Dozens of villains are attacking citizens. Let the attackers closest to the scene mobilize immediately. Team leader Han Jae-hyuk, who was tracking Lee Min-sung, was given an order from the upper level. These crazy bastards, why are there so many villains these days? Han Jae-hyuk immediately dragged his men and moved directly to the place where the villains appeared. Ah! The scene was a mess, bodies dying in a gruesome manner, villains stepping past them. No, they're not villains. Chills. Arriving at the scene, Han Jae-hyuk, who finally confirmed their appearance, got goosebumps. Villain was a term referring to an awakened person who became a criminal, but the moment he saw them, his instincts were giving him a strong warning. That is not human. Like Mistburn, those who were once human but have turned into demonic beasts. The association recently gave them a new name, mutant. Jehu. Just in time, the mutants, rotting like corpses, discovered the association's hunters and started attacking them. The battle started, and Han Jae-hyuk hurriedly picked up his walkie-talkie and shouted while deploying his defense skills. Reporting. They're not villains, they're mutants. Conversation seems completely impossible, and we don't have enough power. Ah! At the same time, an association hunter who was evacuating citizens was attacked and fell down. Then, the mutants rushed towards him as he fell. Why are you so strong? Han Jae-hyuk, who was radioing, witnessed the scene a step later and jumped in hastily. Right then, open fire. Swoosh! A rain of arrows suddenly fell down from the sky. It was truly spectacular. The pouring arrows evaded people and hit only the bodies of the mutants. Surprised, Han Jae-hyuk looked back. There, the hunters of the famous Reaper Guild aimed their bows at once. Lee Min-sung isn't there. What kind of situation is this again? Lim Tae-gyu was standing in the middle of them with a stern expression. He checked the appearances of the mutants one by one and then screamed, "Why did our guild members end up like this here?" The mutants that appeared on the streets were all members of the Reaper Guild who had been kidnapped by Lee Min-sung. Chapter 68, Chapter 67, Lee Min-sung, that bastard. Somehow, only the hunters of the Reaper Guild were kidnapped without getting killed. Lim Tae-gyu was furious. When he remembered Lee Min-sung's usual behavior, he realized what he wanted to do. He had been frantic to upgrade his position even within the Reaper Guild all along, to become higher than Tae-gyu, his friend and the guild leader. I don't know what kind of skills you bought with money, but did you have to take our members to be your subordinates and even made them look like this? What the hell are you? What are you doing this for? Looking at the mutants who had already lost their human appearance, Lim Tae-gyu gnashed his teeth and pulled the bowstring. Swook! Magical arrows were created along with blue air currents in the S-class weapon, Reaper's Bow. 1, 2, 3, 4. Swoosh! Swoosh! A total of 5 magic arrows flew in different directions and pierced the scattered bodies of the mutants. Screams came out from the mouths of the mutants who were once in the same guild as him, but now became monsters. For some reason, Lim Tae-gyu seemed to hear that scream like a painful cry. Ah! However, the mutants moved even with Lim Tae-gyu's arrows stuck in their bodies. He was taken aback by their tenacity. Perhaps, because they were senior hunters before they were mutants, their physical abilities were considerable. Besides, since they were still wearing the armor when they were kidnapped, it seemed unreasonable to be able to kill them with 1 or 2 arrows. Lim Tae-gyu gritted his teeth and looked back at the fine guild members he had brought. They were hesitant to attack as their colleagues who they had been laughing and chatting with until a few days ago had turned into monsters. Lim Tae-gyu shouted as he pulled the bowstring again. "Don't hesitate. Those mutants are not human. They're not the guys we used to know anymore." "Yes, sir." "It's useless to empathize because they have already become zombies. Target their legs to slow down their movements, then cut off their limbs." The guild members, who were brought under the extremely cruel yet resolute order, gritted their teeth and took up their weapons. Even in such a situation, being decisive was the true character of Lim Tae-gyu, an S-class hunter who had led the Reaper Guild up until now. The guild members who came to their senses at his lightning-like shouts began to attack the mutants urgently. Is this what the Reaper Guild is like? Association hunters who were rescuing citizens admired their performance. The vice president's issue was still the same, having many controversies. But the Reaper Guild was still the Reaper Guild, one of the top guilds in Korea. Its potential was most evident in emergency situations like that. But the problem is that the mutants were also members of the Reaper Guild. Even though they lost their minds and became monsters, the experiences engraved in their bodies did not easily disappear. Mutants spread, hide. The mutants escaped the Reaper Guild's attack and hid inside the building. Soon after, the citizens inside the building became their victims. Gag! Please save! The guild members who saw the unexpected counterattack of the mutants were perplexed. Stop! Don't let them enter the building. Eventually, they chased the screams coming from all over the building. That was a trap. Wing! What? There is a swarm of bees in the building. Contaminated wasps waiting for the hunters to enter the building attacked. Wasps? These are not ordinary bees. They are insect-type monsters. Poison. Never get stung by the bees. Things got messy. They chased the mutants and entered the building. Then, there was a swarm of bees. No matter how well trained the Reaper Guild was, it was inevitable to panic in such a situation. Lim Taegyu realized, unlike the appearance of mutants, they were moving strategically. This meant that someone was manipulating them from behind. It was obvious who it was Lee, Min, Sung. A scream filled with magic erupted from Lim Taegyu's mouth. Where are you? Where are you hiding? The echoing voice of the S-Class hunter shook the air like a shockwave and shattered the windows of the buildings. Your ears! Cover your ears! Association hunters shouted urgently while rescuing citizens. At the center of the chaos, Lim Taegyu held the Reaper's bow and aimed towards the sky. Multi-shots. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Numerous arrows with magical power shot toward the sky and fell to the ground in a parabolic arc like a fountain. Some of the arrows hit the top of the heads of mutants who were roaming the streets. Some of the arrows penetrated the broken windows and into the torso of the mutants who were attacking people inside. Not a single arrow among them accidentally harmed the citizens. Whoa. Team leader Han Jae-yuk of the Association Hunter could not keep his mouth shut at that amazing skill. If they had something like this, they should have used it sooner. Even with that said, there was a huge gap in such skills. It was understandable that Lim Taegyu cherished that. The effect was certain. Ack! The mutants whose bodies were pierced by the arrows could not even get up and struggled on the floor. The arrow threaded their entire torso to the floor and fixed them as they were. The Reaper Guild members rushed at them and cut off their limbs. Their colleagues who they were laughing and chatting with just a few days ago. I'm sorry, Jae-sob. Killed. The Association Hunters breathed a sigh of relief. With the help of the Reaper Guild, the number of mutants was noticeably decreasing. Good. At this rate, sooner or later this place will be tidied up. But that was then. Something odd happened. Ack! A sound was suddenly heard from somewhere. There was Lim Taegyu, looking down at the sword that pierced his stomach with a puzzled expression. His mind was blurry. It's poison. However, what surprised Lim Taegyu more than that was the fact that he did not see it coming. Who the hell could deceive the senses of an S-Class hunter and attack from behind? He immediately looked back and confirmed the identity of the person who stabbed him, and his mind went blank. Cough. Why did you? The person didn't simply attack from behind. Ever since, he had been standing right behind him. Always had. Sorry, boss. Secretary O, who had stabbed Lim Taegyu, smirked. It's still too early. Vice President Lee Min-sung needs to be a little more aggressive. Suho asked Arsha, You don't seem to care much about that, do you? Even though Lee Min-sung is imitating the Queen Bee and creating her own army, Arsha, the real Queen Bee, seemed unconcerned. I'm pretty perplexed. Was he really a hard-raised worker bee? Then, you should have sent the Lancers to catch him as soon as he ran away. I was going to do that at first, too. But no matter how much I send ordinary Lancers, I can't do anything about him. The contaminated Lancers were C-class or lower-level hunters. No matter how many of such worker bees went after him, it was impossible to catch Lee Min-sung, who was an A-class hunter, just like how Suho defeated them all and arrived at that place. Arsha frowned, crossed her legs, corrected her posture, and sat down. I also have a lot of headaches, too. Originally, my plan was to quietly hide here and follow in the footsteps of Croatia, so I lived a really quiet life. The number of lancers you had was too many for that. This is rather small. I gathered them up little by little so that I wouldn't get caught in the association. If I had planned to collect them quickly, wouldn't I have collected 100 times more? I guess so. Suho agreed with that. As he heard, the way to make a lancer was simple. Feed them royal jelly. Nothing more, nothing less. If one was lucky enough to take in royal jelly well, they would become a lancer. Otherwise, they would die. Actually, it takes a lot of work. First, I have to tame each bee that lives on Earth into my own power, and I have to put my royal jelly in the bee sting. Those words coming from a queen bee, don't you sound like a beekeeper instead? Beru unintentionally mocked Arsha with an innocent look. Arsha looked a little hurt. I couldn't help it. Crossing the dimensional rift, I lost all of my worker bees, so I had to find new ones, one by one. You must have had a hard time. I'm sorry. I killed all the lancers you worked so hard for today. Lee Min-sung also ran away, apologizing with an expression that doesn't feel sorry at all. Arsha responded in a bewildered manner at Suho's soulless apology. Then she smiled and crossed her arms proudly. Well, it's okay. Although Lee Min-sung, whom I worked hard to raise, became a disloyal worker and ran away, his instincts are still working faithfully for me. For you? Yes, he must still be working hard to make me the queen of insects. Of course, you may not be aware of it yourself. At Arsha's words, Suho felt a strange sense of déjà vu. According to the Baiko Guild's briefing, all Min-sung did in the past few days was raiding and kidnapping hunters. Why did he kidnap the hunters to create his own legion and kill? What if killing people is the goal itself? A flash of light struck Suho's head momentarily. He finally realized, to succeed the dead monarch, to become the new monarch. He has seen that process before. The king of beasts, Fang Monarch, chuckles and looks at his pontifex. Just in time, as if in response to that realization, Rakan sent a message. Suho said while glaring at Arsha, who was sitting peacefully despite losing all his ground. You need a sacrifice. Flinch. As many offerings as possible to hold a sacrifice for the dead Croatia. Suho was convinced when he saw Arsha's reaction as her expressions gradually hardened at his words. Lee Min-sung is performing the sword dance outside for you right now. Seeing how only hunters are killed, I guess Croatia needs a sacrifice imbued with magic. Well, it would be strange if you didn't know that. It may be different, but you must have done something similar to become a descendant of the Fang Monarch. He was a pontifex, not a descendant, but it was good. Suho shrugged and asked, But, will you be okay? The Reaper Guild is firmly targeting Lee Min-sung. If he stood still, I'm afraid he would be tied up in one barrel. Besides, to catch the A-class Lee Min-sung, of course, the S-class guild leader would have to step up. Stop. Suho then kept his mouth shut. Arsha, who had Lee Min-sung by his side for a long time, could never have known that fact. The fact that if an S-class hunter steps forward, Lee Min-sung will be caught in an instant. She became uneasy. You yourself planted the traitor, Lee Min-sung, next to the guild leader. Flinch. Scared of Suho's words, a genuine expression appeared for the first time on Arsha's relaxed face. Chapter 69. Chapter 68. Is that so? Can't be careless then. Arsha bursts into laughter. Don't tell me you can also see right through here. However, there was not even a hint of laughter in the eyes that glared at Suho. Wing, the swarm of bees that formed Arsha's face, kept scattering and coming together, showing how perplexed she was right now. Suho smirked. I must be right. That's enough for the conversation. Arsha suddenly stood up, so Suho asked teasingly, Suddenly? Are you busy? Of course. I have to go collect the sacrifices that Lee Min-sung killed and look for a new beehive to move into. Where are you moving? Did you find any places? Wherever that place is, Mr. Suho won't be able to find it. That's sad. I was thinking of going to your housewarming party. That would be impossible. None of them was backing out of the verbal battle. Looking back at Suho, Arsha said with a most gorgeous smile, While we were chatting, this basement was filled with my poison. Poison? Yes, it's a colorless, odorless poison made with great care, so even a descendant of the Fang Monarch would not have noticed. The reason why Arsha talked with Suho in that place was to buy time for her poison to penetrate completely deep into his body. Arsha's smile towards Suho was gradually turning into a cruel one. If you enter the queen bee's nest with your own feet, you either leave as a worker bee or a prey. So, let's bid our farewell here. Huh. But why? For some reason, the little ant, Beru, was giggling on the table holding his stomach, a laugh that contained a much deeper mockery than before. On the other hand, unlike Beru, Suho was not smiling at all. Just like when he first came down there, he just got up from his chair and stood side by side with Arsha and started talking. Great, I'm thinking of going to Lee Min-sung anyway. Shall we go together? How? Arsha, who was confident in her own poison, hurriedly moved away from Suho as if she had been burned. She couldn't feel the slightest bit of poison from Suho. Even at that moment, Suho was supposedly being poisoned in real time. But a harmful ingredient has been detected. The detoxification begins with the effect of blessing, great spellcaster Kandiaru's protection. Detoxification has been completed. Detoxification has been completed. Detoxification has been completed. Detoxification messages rained down in front of Suho's eyes. No way! Withstanding my poison? Such a power! Seeing Suho like that, Arsha cried out in shock. Did you really get hold of another Croatia relic? Arsha watched him fight the Lancers earlier through the bees. At the end, like the Lancers, Arsha thought that Suho could have obtained a relic. However, it was only a possibility, and the possibility of a mere human obtaining the relic of a great monarch was extremely slim. But this made it clear. It was impossible to withstand such poison unless he had inherited a relic left by the plague monarch. If you are already a descendant of the Fang monarch, why are you still aiming for the position of successor to Croatia? Arsha's confidence made Beru and Suho look sad. It was hard to counter what she knew because they felt bad. The king of beasts, Fang monarch, grabs his stomach and stomps his feet while laughing. Let's go, Beru. Suho ignored Arsha and turned his back. He heard everything he wanted to hear, so there was no reason to be there anymore. Answer me before you go. Hearing Arsha's words from behind, Suho suddenly looked back and his eyes lit up. I'll tell you the answer the next time I meet your body. However, you won't be able to be safe then, unlike today. The meaning behind that would have been conveyed enough without having to say it. Suho climbs the stairs straight to the ground floor. Looking at his back, Arsha gritted her teeth with a look of resentment. How dare you show your back defenselessly in front of me? That's what it means to be confident. He stole all my worker bees and the poison doesn't work? If it goes like this? Wasn't that human being more like a queen bee than herself? This can't be. I must hurry up the sacrifice. At that point, whether it was Lee Min-sung or Sung Suho, the anxiety that the successor might be taken away by someone came over. Arsha's body shattered. Wing! Citizens witnessed countless bees flying somewhere like smoke in Times Square. Are you leaving that stupid queen behind? It's not even the body, so why bother staying there? Lee Min-sung is more of the problem now. In Suho's eyes, Arsha's beautiful appearance was just a cluster of bees. If he caught a few of those bees, he wouldn't get much experience, and above all, Arsha didn't seem to be a trouble. Well, since all the Lancers she worked so hard to collect are gone, she's going to hide quietly for a while. It is the fate of a queen bee to hide in a beehive for the rest of her life. Release the strong spirit. To save mana, Suho also let go of the blessing. Blessing is cancelled. Swook. The spiritual wind that had been swirling around Suho's body calmed down, and his hair, which had been bleached silver and fluttering, returned to black again. Until a little while ago, he had maintained his strength while dealing with the queen bee, but he needed to save mana until he found Lee Min-sung. Gray's spiritual body leaves the body of the priest. Go back in. Suho sent Gray, who had fallen out of his body, back to the shadow dungeon. Thud. Right then. Hunter Sung Suho, are you all right? In front of Suho, who had just come up to the first floor, he ran into Baeko guild members who were just about to go down to the basement. Baek Miho, who was in the lead, quickly checked Suho's condition. Then she tilted her head. They said his hair was bleached, but it's now black. Did he stop casting his skill? Baek Miho, who wanted to see with his own eyes whether Suho had really used the beast transformation skill, felt regretful. She could ask him directly if he had the beast transformation skill, but right now there were a lot of more important issues than that. First of all, Suho was the only one not wearing a gas mask in that area full of poison mist. He gave gas masks to his colleagues and disappeared. Could it be that he even gave up his gas mask to his colleagues? Baekmiho couldn't just ignore Suho's spirit of sacrifice. Please give this person a gas mask as soon as possible. Yes, Vice President. At Baekmiho's instruction, a guild member took out a gas mask from his bag and tried to put it on Suho's face. However, Suho politely declined and continued on his way. No, thanks. I'm a bit busy right now, so I have to get out of here right away. It is the same for us. Other hunters are also evacuating outside. More than that, what the hell happened here? Baekmiho followed Suho as he was about to leave Times Square, asking questions. The other hunters said that you saved them, but how? Now is not the time for such small talk. Suho interrupted Baekmiho with a serious expression. We need to find and stop Lee Min-sung immediately. What? Suddenly? What? Right then. Vice President, headquarters has contacted you. A Baeko guild member who was holding a cell phone behind him urgently called Baekmiho. Right now, Lee Min-sung is carrying out a massacre in the streets. Both Suho and Baekmiho's heads turned at the same time. Thud. No matter who came first, the two started running towards the exit of the labyrinth. Wait for us, Vice President. The startled Baeko guild members followed them one step later. All of a sudden, they felt strange. Wait, didn't you say that person was C-class? Why is he so fast? Surprisingly, Suho was running at almost the same speed as Baekmiho, an A-class hunter. Baekmiho, who was running right next to him, was even more shocked. Huh? His profile clearly says he's a summoning hunter? He had not yet transformed into a beast, his main skill. In addition, because this place was a winding labyrinth, it was impossible to sprint in a straight line. However, apart from this and that, Suho's current speed was by no means that of a C-class summoning hunter. Coincidentally, Suho was thinking the same thing while looking at Baekmiho. She's fast. An A-class hunter after all. He suddenly remembered Lee Min-sung, whom he was going to catch now, was also an A-class hunter. Just as much as Queen Bee Arsha had regrets, Lee Min-sung would have been different from the lancers made only of C-class or lower-level hunters. If he made up his mind and ran away, it might have been a little annoying. Besides, doesn't Lee Min-sung even have wings? Oh, I had a good idea. Baekmiho. Yes? Suho called her right next to him, so Baekmiho looked at him in surprise. How long do you think it will take to go all the way from here to Lee Min-sung? Running? Obviously. Did you think of going by car? There will be traffic at this hour. Ah. After the cataclysm, traffic jams in Seoul became severe. This was because the gates were opened at several major subway stations and the train lines were cut off. In an emergency like now, it was much faster to run. Baekmiho, who understood Suho's intentions, calculated the distance for a while and answered confidently. I think 20 minutes will be enough if I run at full power. How about you? Suho could feel the competitive spirit in the provocative eyes looking at him. Even though they were running side by side now, it was a grounded confidence that if they changed into beasts and sprinted, they would be vastly faster than they were now. Well, after all, you're an A-class. Suho raised his thumb in genuine admiration, and with a more pure expression, he suggested to Baekmiho, I'm afraid I'll be much slower than that, so why don't you carry me on your back? What? Baekmiho doubted her ears. Chapter 70, Chapter 69. In order for Suho to sprint, he had to use several buff skills that reduce mana in real time. The used mana can be restored with a potion, but no one knows what it would be like if they arrived in front of Lee Min-sung. I have to conserve my physical strength as much as possible so that I can go straight into battle as soon as I arrive. He decided to use Baekmiho, who was nearby. Carry? Yes. You? Hunter Sung Suho? Yes, you're on the way there anyway, so please give me a ride. I mean, wait, how could you ask that very casually? Baekmiho was greatly taken aback when Suho tried to climb on her back right away. Are you serious? Is this the time for a leisurely joke then? Wow. Baekmiho was stunned by Suho's brazenness. Looking at those serious eyes, it seemed that he was not joking at all. Suho wasn't even joking in the first place, but what crazy person would dare to say nonsense to the vice president of the Baiko Guild? He just asked her to carry him. Like she was some kind of a taxi or what? I have to stock up on my physical strength as much as possible until I meet Lee Min-song. Then what about my physical strength? For an A-class hunter, carrying me on your back won't reduce your physical strength or mana, right? Yeah, but glad to hear that. I'm a C-class hunter, and my physical strength was exhausted. I can't rest first before fighting as soon as I get there, right? Does that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. Obviously it doesn't, but Baek Miho was strangely kind of being persuaded by Suho's words. They were in such an urgent situation that she couldn't afford to refute every word he said. Even if they weren't, she was feeling a strange pressure and intimidation from Suho that could not be expressed in words. Yes, that feeling was like, why does it feel like facing my father? The king of beasts, Fang Monarch giggles and looks at Baek Miho. Baek Miho did not realize that now, from afar, the greatest king of beasts was looking down at her. The spirit of the mighty predator was secretly flowing through Suho, the Pontifex, and putting pressure on Baek Miho. She finally closed her eyes and shouted, "All right, it's a waste of time to argue like this right now. Swoosh!" Oh, Baek Miho's whole body overflowed with the beast's energy. Suho and Beru's eyes lit up at the same time. No wonder Rakan had been watching her from the realm of death before. If it wasn't for me, this person could have been the Pontifex of Rakan. Foxy. A mysterious ability that strengthens the human body like a beast. He heard rumors that if Baek Yunho, the guild leader of the Baeko White Tiger Guild, increased this power to the extreme, he would turn into a white tiger. But Baek Miho, fox? Swoosh. Baek Miho engulfed the energy of an animal, transformed into an agile fox-like figure, and looked down proudly at Suho. Fluffy white hair. The pure white aura flowing over her created fox-like ears and a tail. Great, I'll get on then. Baek Miho's eyes shook for a moment at Suho, unhesitantly getting on her back. He wasn't overwhelmed by my energy? A C-class hunter like him? There was a hierarchy that was determined instinctively among hunters who used the same beast transformation skill. It was possible to suppress or ignore that instinct with human will and guts, but it was normal to react like the members of the Baeko Guild behind them. Kog, V Vice President. The Baeko Guild members were feeling the energy radiating from Baek Miho and were extremely shocked as their complexions turned white. Like beasts facing a stronger predator. But Suho was different. Tak, come on, let's go, hurry! Like a cicada attached to an old tree, Suho was sitting peacefully on Baek Miho's back. Even on top of that cicada, there is one more smaller and louder cicada. Can't we get going now, Fox? Hold on tight. Baek Miho bit her teeth hard and her eyes flashed. Because I will run with all my might. Swoosh! At that moment, Baek Miho's new appearance, carrying Suho, became a ray of light and shot forward. It was not as easy as a hunter thought to sprint in the city center. The problem is the people who roam on the streets. The moment an awakener brushes against one of them while running, ordinary people would literally bounce off like bowling pins. For a traffic accident, it was more dangerous than being hit by a dump truck. After the cataclysm, such incidents were frequent. It was a case where rookies who had just awakened run around intoxicated with their own power and unintentionally caused major accidents. However, with the launch of the Hunter Association, the Hunter Law was created, and since then there have been few cases where hunters sprinted recklessly on the road. No matter how confident one was in their physical abilities, they would tend to use normal transportation whenever possible. But in an emergency like now, things were different. Move on the top of the buildings as much as possible. Baek Miho, with Suho on her back, was moving by leaping over the buildings. Her speed was so fast that ordinary people could not dare to follow her with their eyes. Huh? Right there. Oh? What? I don't see anything, though? Did I see it wrong? She was so fast that even if someone recognized her from a distance and tried to take a picture, she would already disappear by that time. Suho was genuinely admiring Baek Miho's movements. Surely fast. Is this the A-class level? Through that, Suho was estimating the level of Lee Min-song to fight with later on. Whew, she's a pretty nimble fox. I will ride often in the future. Beru, it's rude to say that. Baek Miho pursed her lips in anger at the conversation behind her back. Summoning hunters and summons were shameless. But really, at this speed, we should arrive in 20 minutes. That's right. As the conversation continued, Baek Miho finally opened her mouth. Did you really think of me as a taxi? It was then. But Suho looked at Beru and said, the sooner the better. Beru's eyes squinted and he smiled evilly. Ring. Beru uses skill Harsh Command. The Harsh Commander, Brokey, and the buff skill Beru acquired was activated. Since this buff was a skill that only applied to beasts, it could also be used on the beast that Suho was riding at this moment. Skill, Harsh Command, increases Miho Baek's stats by 50%. As a side effect of skill Harsh Command, Baek Miho is cursed with madness. Baek Miho's eyes suddenly changed. A furious rage bubbled up from the depths of her heart and rose to the top of her head. She was unaware if that rage was because of Suho and Beru's chatter or because of the unknown buff skill. Grr! The moment she surrendered to that emotion, her body felt like it was about to fly. Swoosh! Great! Raging. Totally. Suho succeeded in arriving at the scene in 10 minutes. Skill, Harsh Command, is cancelled. Are you okay? Yeah. Baek Miho came back to her senses and looked a little tired, perhaps because she had worked harder than usual. She was at a level where she recovered quickly with just a little breath. More important than that was the situation they arrived at. What the hell is this? Baek Miho looked at the scene unfolding in front of her with a serious expression. Bizarre-looking mutants were attacking citizens. The hunters were busy trying to stop them, but the problem was that the citizens who were corrupted by the mutants were gradually rotting and turning into new mutants. The situation seemed to get out of hand if it was not resolved quickly. Oh my God, a zombie apocalypse in the middle of the city. No, they are not zombies. Baek Miho's words were immediately corrected by Suho. It's a ghoul. In Suho's eyes, the name tags were clearly visible above the heads of the mutants. Contaminated ghoul. Contaminated ghoul. Zombies and ghouls are completely different. If zombies were walking corpses, ghouls were rather like vampires. To be precise, a food demon. In other words, if vampires consume human blood, ghouls consume human flesh. Above all, what made them different from zombies was that ghouls were not dead bodies, so they were not stupid. But for some reason, the ghouls there were more interested in killing people than consuming them, and the victims who were attacked by them rose up as new ghouls while their flesh gradually rotted away, like zombies. These guys' purpose was not a simple massacre. The royal jelly that Queen Bee Arsha used to increase her soldiers, a powerful poisonous aura was felt from the contaminated ghouls. As Arsha said, Lee Min-sung is now gathering more ghouls to form his own legion. Suho, who quickly grasped the situation, looked at Beru. Beru. Yes, can you find Lee Min-sung? I have already found him. Beru's antennae, which had been bobbing non-stop since earlier, stopped abruptly. Following the directions indicated, Suho and Baek Miho simultaneously raised their heads and looked up, and at the same time, their expressions hardened. It was dark even under the lamp. There was a 40-story residential commercial complex right in front of them. A huge beehive had been built on the upper floors of the high-rise building, which could only be seen if you looked up. You mean there's Lee Min-sung up there? Baek Miho, who heard the conversation between the two, widened her eyes and clenched her fists. Tremendous momentum surged from her whole body. Hunter Sung Suho, let's move separately from now on. I'll raid that hive, and you stay here. It looks like the electricity has been cut off. Can you go up the stairs to the top? I will take care of that. Wait. Suho grabbed Baek Miho by the back as she tried to run straight into the building. What? She looked back at Suho with a flushed face in embarrassment, and Suho smiled and said, You gave me a ride on the way here, so I'll give you a ride this time. Kia! Baek Miho looked back in shock when someone suddenly lifted her body up. General class. Just in time, the Black Lancers rose from the shadows of Suho. A soldier the size of a man with black steam took Suho and Miho Baek in their arms. We don't have time, so let's fly. Chapter 71. Chapter 70, 10 minutes before Suho's arrival. Numerous drones were flying over the city where the disaster occurred. Suddenly appearing mutants are attacking the citizens. Real-time news with shocking content hit the country. Currently, the police hunters of the Hunter Association are quickly suppressing the situation. No matter how hopeful the news was, the situation shown on the screen was not. Citizens were screaming and running away everywhere. Mutants were following them at breakneck speed and were attacking them. Also, Kawa! The wounds of the citizens bitten by them rot away at a rapid rate, where they even turn into new mutants right at the scene. Despite the struggles of the Association hunters, the number of mutants is increasing rapidly. It was a so-called zombie apocalypse in the middle of the city. Currently, the Hunter Association is in the process of recruiting more troops to the field, but it will take some time for them to arrive. In the end, the problem was time. Overall, the place where the disaster occurred is in the middle of Seoul, where tens of thousands of citizens live. If that large population turned into mutants, Korea would have no choice but to face an apocalypse. Even at that moment, several guilds were sending additional support, but their number was lacking. The hunters were always busy, and it would take quite a while to arrive unless the hunters were nearby. Right then, something odd happened. Ah! This is the Reaper Guild. A drone camera suddenly appeared and captured the members of the Reaper Guild shooting magical arrows at the mutants. Guild leader Lim Taegyu of the Reaper Guild has arrived at the scene with his guild members. All the drones started taking close-ups of Lim Taegyu. He took the lead and began to actively help the struggling association hunters by directing the members of the Reaper Guild. Meanwhile, the Hunter Association is arguing that the root cause is villain Lee Min-seong, who was the vice president of the Reaper Guild. At the same time, news began to appear on the internet emphasizing that the cause of this incident was not the Reaper Guild, but solely Lee Min-seong. Numerous comments began to run under the articles. Does that make sense? They're probably still all connected somehow. Did they cut ties with him? It seems that the vice president lost it in a fit of anger. What if our country goes down? I'm glad I live in the countryside. Public opinion had long since antagonized the guild. They were already seen in bad light due to rumors, so they were firmly stigmatized by the incident. However, even the malicious commenters who cursed the guild had no choice but to admit one fact. Lim Taegyu, an S-class hunter, the tremendous sight of the countless magic arrows he shoots at the mutants every moment was captured on the screen. Awesome. Lim Taegyu is amazing. S-class are really different. If he had that skill, he should have quietly gone solo. Why bother creating a guild and receive swearing from the public? Information. His hunter skill and manager skills are different. Information. Lim Taegyu's weapon is the Reaper's bow, but the price is... Right then, the secretary standing behind Lim Taegyu made a strange move. Huh? Hey, wait! At his back! His back! Look behind you! Lim Taegyu was concentrating on the battle. The viewers who were watching him through drones were the first to sense something. However, Lim Taegyu was not able to see the comments and was totally unguarded. Secretary O was standing behind him. That's crazy. What was that? Betrayal? Was he Lee Min-seong's pawn? Why are you so helpless? Were S-class hunters originally that weak? No way. Did he get poisoned? Viewers watching the news were in shock. Even S-class hunters were not invincible. Even if their attack power and defense power were incredibly high, as long as they were human, if they were injured, they would be sick, and if they were fatally wounded, they would inevitably die. However, for those who did not know the details, it was hard to believe that the S-class hunter was stabbed by a dagger and fell to his knees. Kew! Surprised by the person he trusted, Lim Taegyu immediately pulled out the dagger stuck in his back. The psychological shock was greater than the physical pain. Secretary O, why did you? Secretary O only put on a puzzled expression. Boss, I am sorry. I have a great mission from the Queen. What queen are you? Suddenly, Taegyu Lim's legs staggered. It was the poison. Not an ordinary poison, but an extreme poison. Secretary O bowed politely to Lim Taegyu. Don't strain yourself and accept it. The poison I used is the Queen's royal jelly. Royal jelly? Memories flashed through Lim Taegyu's mind. Boss, it's your birthday, right? Here's a gift. Hey, a gift. What is it? It's a high-quality liquor that I had a hard time getting through an acquaintance. Would you like to try it? Nice. The name is Royal Jelly, right? It's good for your body. Secretary O gave Lim Taegyu a Western liquor called Royal Jelly as a gift whenever he had a chance. Why does the name of the drink with a strangely sweet scent come to his mind at a moment like that? Cheers. Lim Taegyu felt a tremendous headache. At the same time, a powerful message resonates in his head. Be loyal to the Queen. Be loyal to the Queen. Ack! Lim Taegyu threw away even the bow of the Reaper Guild and rolled on the floor, holding his head with both hands. It was impossible for Royal Jelly, which had failed to control even Lee Minsong, to get through a higher-level hunter. Get out of my head! Grumble. Lim Taegyu screamed out loud as a huge aura swirled through his body. Secretary O hurriedly left from the sudden attack. However, Lim Taegyu had no time to care about him and fought against the voice who tried to devour his mind. President, a healer from the Reaper Guild, who noticed what was happening, approached Lim Taegyu and hurriedly healed him. However, it was not an ordinary poison that was consuming Lim Taegyu's body. It was impossible to decipher with normal skills. President, the heal doesn't work. I think you have to drive out the poison with your own mana power. Mana. His mana was already doing that. Lim Taegyu focused all his mana and fought against the energy of Royal Jelly. It seemed that if that process was broken even for a moment, his mind would be corrupted. Ack, don't mind me. Go see the other guild members. And catch that secretary who ran away. It seems like he was working under Lee Minsung. Yes, sir. After giving orders to his subordinates, Lim Taegyu sat down with his back leaning as he was out of breath. Fighting or anything, he couldn't use any skills because he was suppressing the poison with his mana. It seemed that his mind would be subdued as soon as he used any skill. I have to counter it with mana power. But even that wasn't easy. The ambush he just suffered was just a trigger. The high-quality liquor, called Royal Jelly, he had received from Secretary O had been accumulated in his body. Swoosh! Suho and Baek Miho arrived at the scene just in time. Baek Miho? Lim Taegyu, who was fighting the poison, immediately recognized her. Baek Miho, the vice president of the Baekho Guild, came. However, who was she carrying on her back? What kind of person would the great Baek Miho carry? If he was such a talented person, Lim Taegyu would have recognized him. The face of the young man Baek Miho brought down from her back was a face he had never seen before. Just then, the young man's head lifted as he looked around at the situation. From a while ago, he found a suspicious beehive that was on the upper floors of the surrounding buildings. Let's fly right away. Those words suddenly came out of his mouth. As much as he couldn't use any skill, Lim Taegyu, who was paying attention to the surrounding situation, felt puzzled when he heard Suho. Fly? Swook! A black shadow rose from under the young man's feet, wrapping around both him and Baek Miho. Whoa! The situation was so sudden that even Baek Miho was startled. Lim Taegyu, who was watching from afar, opened his eyes wide as if they were going to pop out. 2 pairs of wings with black steam were on their backs. What are those? As soon as Suho saw the contaminated ghouls, he quickly grasped the situation. The purpose of Lee Minseong was to create his own legion by killing citizens. As a result, he chose a structure where there were countless lives as Arsha intended, and more number of sacrifices. All the casualties were a sacrifice to the Queen of Insects, Plague Monarch, Quaratia. We don't have time. If things go on just like that, it would only be a matter of time before the ritual would eventually be completed, as Arsha planned. Speed was the answer. I'll leave these ones to the hunters, and I'll catch the captain. He had no intention of going up the stairs of that high building step by step. I must fly. Suho had shadow soldiers with wings. 2 of you, come out. At Suho's command, shadows swayed beneath his feet. Suddenly, Suho had a good idea. These guys are shadows anyway. Shadows can exist anywhere, even if it's not under Suho's feet. Even Beru would hide in the small shadows that existed in every corner of Suho's body and then pop out. It was possible for only his face to stick out while his body remained in the shadows. That means it would be possible for the others to do it too. Suho ordered the Shadow Lancers hiding in his shadow. Ride on our backs and just take out your wings. They soon followed Suho's order. Swoosh! A Shadow Lancer pulled the pairs of wings from his back. Another black shadow covered Suho's shoulders and back, creating a strange shape. Huh? Seeing that, Beru smiled at Suho with a strange expression. This is a really interesting strategy. You're only halfway through summoning soldiers. It's definitely a new era. Such idea is novel. Boomer. Beru reacted defensively. The king of beasts, Fang Monarch, raises a question, asking if he imitated the blessing skill. What are you talking about? You can see for yourself. Suho smiled and flew away. Bake Miho, who floated beside him, couldn't help but be astonished. Oh my god, I heard he was a C-class summoning hunter. What kind of skill was that? Summoned wings? Was there a skill that allowed one to attach wings to the body of a comrade like that? Most of all, if you had skills like this, why did you ask me to carry you on my back? Bake Miho stared at Suho, implying that it was unfair. Suho responded shamelessly. When I get tired, my mana decreases. Anyway, let's go up to the beehive like this. Right then. Wait a minute. Take me too. Suddenly, they heard someone screaming urgently. Bake Miho confirmed his identity and exclaimed in surprise. President Lim Taegyu? Who is that person? Reaper Guild, one of the representative guilds in Korea. The name of Lim Taegyu, the guild leader there, was familiar to Suho. He didn't look very good, but an S-class hunter would definitely be of help. Go with that one guy over there. Swoosh! At those words, a black shadow flew and clung to Lim Taegyu's body. Follow me with your own will. Suho left only those words and started preparing to fly again. What the hell is this? Suddenly, Lim Taegyu felt a strange sensation as something clung to his body. Regardless, he meekly accepted the shadow. I might be able to reject it if I push it away with mana. He felt a sense of rejection for a moment, but he endured it. In the first place, he couldn't use his mana separately because he was countering the effect of royal jelly. Swish! Soon after, the shadow wings that sprouted from Lim Taegyu's back began to flap. Then, at a tremendous speed, he flew up after Suho and Bake Miho. The target was the beehive. Wing! As they got closer and closer to the beehive, a huge rain of rose suddenly came from inside the beehive. Each of them was an arrow surrounded by an aura. Oh my! Bake Miho and Lim Taegyu were surprised. No one knew how it would be if they were on the ground, but there was no way to dodge that many arrows while floating in the air. It was a situation where they had to shield themselves or become shields helplessly. Bake Miho hurriedly shouted, President Lim Taegyu, Hunter Sung Suho, hide behind me. If there was no way to avoid it, it was best for one person to act as a shield. Among the three of them, it was the most effective for a fighter to become a shield. Ooh, you're a pretty noble fox. Beru went on Miho Bake's hair and stroked it. But, don't worry. Beru smiled faintly and looked at the back of Suho. Our young master will solve it. Suho's eyes flashed. Don't back down. Keep flying.
Kirk.
The shadow lancers attached to their backs flapped their wings even harder. That moment. Use skill, Blade Storm. Swish! The wind created a raging-like typhoon. Before they knew it, the twin swords held in both hands of Suho began to brutally slaughter the entire space into the barrage of arrows. Suho, Bake Miho, and Lim Taegyu fly straight through the center of the typhoon. In particular, the shock felt by Bake Miho, who knew Suho as a summoning hunter, was indescribable. Oh my god, what is this? Wasn't he just a C-class summoning hunter? Following the summoned wings, he also has such a tremendous attack skill? Did he hide his power? Why? It made no sense at first. What kind of hunter in the world would lower his class and value by suppressing his skills? Chapter 72, Chapter 71. Suho, Bake Miho, and Lim Taegyu managed to break through the rain of arrows and enter the beehive. The moment they hit the floor, thud! No matter who came first, Suho and Miho jumped forward at a tremendous speed. They cut the throats of the archers who were shooting arrows at them. Slash! Ack! You have killed the contaminated ghoul. You have killed the contaminated ghoul. They were the same as the mutants on the ground. Damn it! They are all our guild members. Lim Taegyu recognized their faces and gritted his teeth. Even though they were mutated, a little bit of what they were like before remained. These are all the guild members he took with him? Bake Miho muttered with a serious expression. Somehow, all the other hunters were killed and only the members of the Reaper Guild were kidnapped. Could it be that Lee Min-sung wanted to become a guild leader? Anyway, since we've entered the beehive, let's find its owner. Beru, give me directions. Yes, young master, please follow me. Beru took the lead, flicking his antennae. One of Suho's twin swords, Rakan's sword, spoke to Suho. Be careful. This beehive is now a sanctuary. This is a sanctuary? Suho looked at Rakan's sword and asked again to confirm. The king of beasts, Fang Monarch, shrugs that it was not his. Then it must be the sanctuary of Queresha. It seems to be like that. Were sanctuaries originally just created out of nowhere like this? No. The sanctuary is, after all, the realm of the monarchs. Now that all the monarchs are dead, it has become a place where ancestral rites are held for the monarchs. Sanctuary. Suho recalled the sanctuary of Rakan he had been to. That means there could be relics in it. No one knows. There could be relics, descendants, or pontifex. Well, if we meet Lee Minseong, we'll find out. Anyway, it looked like a beehive from the outside, but when they went inside, there was a new space completely separated from the outside. Ominous sky. Thick clouds moved as if a big storm was about to come. The air, covered with fear, smelt of rotting corpses. It feels like entering a gate. Is it a new dungeon? Lim Taegyu muttered as he looked around. To that, Suho replied, it seems different from a dungeon. To be precise, it was a sanctuary. However, with those words, Lim Taegyu felt uncomfortable. Different from a dungeon? What do you know to say that? Lim Taegyu, who was suppressing the royal jelly's toxicity with mana power, was anxious. As the guild leader of the Reaper Guild, he had to take responsibility for all of this. Public opinion has already been against them. Even if he solved this problem this time, he was at a loss on how to solve the mood. He didn't know what Lee Minseong did, but the fact that the person who was the vice president of the Reaper Guild even opened a dungeon in the middle of the city was sure to deal a huge blow to the guild. It would be enormous to pay compensation for accidents to those who died today. However, when Suho, who seemed to have only C-class magic at a glance, suddenly said something strange, Lim Taegyu was dumbfounded. What does a C-class hunter know to throw such words to an S-class hunter? If not a dungeon, then what? Baekmiho hurriedly intervened between the two. There is no time for us to be like this. President Lim Taegyu, are you unable to use magic right now? Lim Taegyu flinched and shut his mouth as he was stabbed by those words. That's right. Poison is spreading in my body right now, so I'm countering it with mana. Didn't you receive a heal? Heal didn't work. I think it will be solved by a more advanced healer later, but there is no suitable healer nearby right now. Then why did you follow us here? Even if you can't use magic, your power should be enough. The excellent physical ability of an S-class hunter was able to exert tremendous power by itself. Ah, it can be used as a shield. That's fortunate. Stop. He will cry. Beru couldn't bear watching them, so he stepped out. Are you kidding? Lim Taegyu was at a loss for words. A small ant floating beside Suho was looking at him with sincere pity. But why? Lim Taegyu, who met Beru's eyes, felt an instinctive rejection. Reluctance? No, this is more chills. Am I afraid? Why? Beru looked at Lim Taegyu's face with a strange expression. You are pretty old too. Lim Taegyu felt puzzled by the way Beru spoke as if he knew him, but that feeling didn't last long. Everyone, get ready for battle. Suho focused his senses and looked around and looked up at the sky. Grumble, a swarm of jet-black bees was swarming in the ominous rolling clouds. Now that he saw it, it wasn't a cloud. This is crazy. Lim Taegyu thought it was absurd. Could it be that all those clouds were swarms of bees? This really seemed to be a beehive. I've collected a lot of information well. Beru wiggled his antennae. The greatest energy is felt beyond the clouds. After all, we'd have to fly again. They came through the rain of arrows, and this time they had to fly through that enormous swarm of bees. Ring! The sanctuary of insects is activated. Suho suddenly felt a chill. It felt just like then, when he entered the sanctuary of beasts. Ring! Skill known is activated. Swoosh! In an instant, Suho's shadow spread in all directions and colored the whole world. And time has stopped. No, everything stopped. Are you here again? Suho stood alone at the edge of the empty horizon. A world of complete blankness. It's the realm of eternal rest. However, the feeling he felt there was completely different from when he met Rakan, the beast monarch. Is it a bug? Suho looked at the ground he was standing on. That whole land, no, that entire white world was made of pure white bugs gathered one after another. Suho lifted his head and looked forward. At the end of that empty horizon, a woman sat cross-legged and looked down proudly at him. Suho realized her true identity at once. "Are you Koresha?" At the question, the corners of the woman's lips curled wickedly. "Yes, that's right. My name is Koresha, the ghost of eternity that was killed by your father." The system urgently popped up a message in front of Suho. "The queen of insects, plague monarch, Koresha, is watching you." At that moment, the woman's presence began to grow enormously. It wasn't just a surge of energy.
Kirk, cat.
The white worms that had been forming this land gradually united into one, and the size of the woman changed to a gigantic one. At one time. Then, looking down at Suho, who had grown relatively small, she licked her lips. "I wanted to try the taste of the same monarch." The giant bug queen giggled and smirked. But in the end, it was me who was eaten. That moment, the ground where Suho was standing turned into a giant hand that grabbed Suho's body. The hand slowly lifted Suho up to Koresha's face. Koresha slowly scanned Suho's figure and remembered the time. "You know that? Your father was a poison worse than any bug I've ever met." It was as if she was trying to find the shadow of Sung Jinwoo who killed her on Suho's face. "You look like him. A lot." "Really? I heard that there are many people who said I look more like my mother." At Suho's reply, Koresha's eyes flashed with mischief for a moment. "What would you taste like if I ate you now? Would you be just like your father?" She had an innocent child's expression, like that of a kid who unintentionally killed small insects with his hands. In that reverse situation, Suho was much smaller in front of the enormously large queen of insects. But he was resolute. "You're bragging about a ghost that died a long time ago." That cheeky way of speaking is exactly like your father. Koresha glared at Suho with a terrifying look and lowered Suho's body to the ground. "Yes, you are right. I'm already dead, but—" Ring! An ominous system message suddenly appeared in front of Suho. "A quest has arrived." Before Suho could even check the message, Koresha's smile turned into a cruel one. "I am originally one in a colony." Koresha was born as a small bug and was the queen of insects that grew up by swallowing countless ones of her kind. All the bugs she swallowed formed Koresha's body. The bugs that filled that world were Koresha's corpse and soul. From the moment you stepped into my world, you were already swallowed up by me. A shady venom felt outside, filled the pure white world. No, that whole world started to reject Suho. The quest window automatically opened in front of Suho. Urgent quest, Koresha Solitude. The king of insects, plague monarch, Koresha has dragged you into solitude. All the bugs that made up Koresha were hostile. Prove yourself worthy by surviving the required time. Required time, 4 hours. Remaining time, 4 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. An arrogant smile appeared on Koresha's lips as she looked down at Suho from a high place. "Struggle well, like a bug, and just like I did in front of your father." At the same time, all the bugs that made up that world started attacking Suho. "Kya! Kya!" However, Koresha felt something strange. Even when he saw the endlessly swarming insects, Suho's expression did not change at all, let alone get bewildered. Regardless if that was a realm of rest, it was a place where even the Suho's shadow soldiers could not be summoned. Wait. Rather, it was Koresha who was taken aback. What is that power? No way. An ominous black aura was entwined around Suho's arm. The energy was not just one. Swoosh! A divine wind was blowing from somewhere, dyeing Suho's hair silver. Koresha, who was well aware of those energies, couldn't help but be perplexed. "You bastard, how many monarchs have you inherited powers from?" Chapter 73. Chapter 72. When monarchs die, they fall into eternal rest. That empty world was a vacuum space where nothing could exist except the soul of the dead monarch. However, there were things that even Suho, who was brought into such a world, could do. First, skills, spiritual body manifestation. Swoosh! Black aura wrapped around Suho's arm. Koresha could recognize that skill. No way, isn't that the power of the Iron Body Monarch? She was astonished. Spiritual body manifestation. The skill of the great mentor Amit, who had made a weak and insignificant goblin reborn into Iron Body Monarch, could be felt in Suho. Also, use skill, bless swoosh. A divine wind moved around Suho's whole body. Use skill, grassland wind. Swish, Suho's hair fluttered in a silver light, and the explosive force of the beast burst out. This can't be the Fang monarchs. Even if it was a world like that, or rather, because it was such a world like that, there was another being who could observe that place. Chills. Who are you? Croatia asked the name of the certain monarch from the gaze she suddenly felt. He was the king of beasts who fought against the shadow monarch with her. The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, watches Croatia. Rakan, why are you lending your power to the son of the shadow monarch? Croatia couldn't understand. Why did Rakan lend his power to the son of the enemy who killed him? No matter how much she tried to deny it, it was the truth. It was the energy of Rakan that dwelled in Suho's body. Spiritual body manifestation. Even if shadow soldiers could not be summoned in that world, Suho alone had the strength to deal with tens of thousands of bugs. Come. Suho plunged his black fist into the pure white tidal wave that was attacking him, rather, in the middle of the pure white insects. Boom! A huge explosion occurred in the center of that huge tidal wave. The remnants scattered in all directions and attacked again, aiming for Suho's blind spot. Boom! Explosive insider. Croatia's venomous moth. Numerous types of poisonous insects attacked Suho. However, Suho, who received Rakan's energy, narrowly avoided them with dazzling movements. Another one. Boom. And another one. Boom. Every time Suho's attack exploded, hundreds of insects burst out. Suho's attack crushed them. Croatia bit her lip with a look of resentment. You're struggling quite a bit, but even so, you are alone, and my bugs will poison you every time they die. Ring. A harmful substance has been detected. The detoxification begins with the effect of blessing great spellcaster Kandiaru's protection. 3, 2, 1. Detoxification is complete. Croatia was shocked to see Suho moving as if nothing had happened. How come you are fine? Suho smiled at Croatia. The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, laughs loudly, saying that bugs are weak. Bastard! Croatia screamed in anger on the top of her lungs. The picture she painted was not like that. Now that the son of the shadow monarch had set foot in her realm, she wanted to harass him as much as she wanted. Her plan was quite realistic enough, because in that world, no external power could be drawn. Even the legions of the proud shadow monarch did not dare to set foot there, because that place was a tomb entirely for herself. But what kind of shit is happening? Still, there is plenty of time. You, too, will eventually get exhausted. Time. At that, Suho glanced around and checked the quest window. Remaining time, 3 hours, 41 minutes, 17. Croatia was right. There was still a long way before 4 hours passed, and it was impossible to keep fighting at such a pace. Besides, I can't even take out my weapon here. For some reason, the inventory didn't open there. What about the shop window? Ring. Potions and shops cannot be used at the current location, and the player's condition does not recover even if level increases. As if answering Suho's thoughts, a system message arrived. Still, my level goes up, right? A small smile appeared on Suho's lips. He wanted to know how much experience points he would receive for catching a few of those bugs, but when the number reached that scale, things changed. Should I just use this opportunity to increase my level properly? Suho's eyes flashed. Since they were already dead bugs, no matter how many times he killed them, the message that they had been eliminated didn't appear. But every time he killed them, their bodies turned to dust and disappeared. Accordingly, if they continued to fight like that, their numbers would gradually decrease. Boom! As Suho continued to fight, he canceled the skills that he couldn't use one by one. Since he had no weapons, his blade storm and twin swordsmanship skills were ineffective, and he could not receive help from the shadow soldiers. The skills that can be used are endurance, ruler's power, grassland wind, giant's armor, and martial arts. However, most of them were skills with a short time limit that consumed mana in real time. In the case of a long-term battle, where he had to fight while conserving physical strength and mana like now, he needed to be a little more strategic. It's fortunate that the blessing is possible, but since I have to conserve mana, I'll have to cancel this first. If he released the strong spirit, his speed would be that much slower, so he wouldn't be able to completely avoid the insect's attacks, but it seemed like he could cover that much with the endurance skill. Cancel skill spirit, but the moment he canceled the spirit skill. A gray dog that had been nesting in Suho's body, no, a gray wolf cub, came out from Suho's body. That little one looked around with a puzzled expression. Gray was startled at seeing the bugs attacking from all sides and hid behind Suho's legs. However, when Suho saw him, a strange thing came to his mind. Oh, wow. Look at this. Canine wolf. Thanks to hard hunting in the Shadow Dungeon, Gray had also leveled up quite a bit. Great, let's level up a bit. Gray, probably understanding Suho's words, hurriedly shook his head. Ha, you, coward, seriously. Suho made a strange expression. However, Gray's senior, who was watching this place from afar, also clicked his tongue at the kid's foolishness. The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, asks you to train his descendants to be stronger. You sure? Suho made a deal with Rakan with a provocative look. Rakan snapped at the deal. The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, says he will give you a piece of advice instead. The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, advises to devour rather than be a prey. Eat rather than be eaten? No way. Suho's gaze stared at those disgusting insects that endlessly attacked. Eat bugs. The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, nodded seriously. There was no way he would say anything outrageous under his identity as the king of beasts. Suho, who hesitated for a moment, smiled. It's all white anyway, so it's less disgusting. Wait. Croatia was taken aback by Suho's answer. You're not trying to follow that madman's words, are you? Seeing that reaction, Suho became more confident. Suho picked up Gray, who was hiding behind him with one hand. Gray, isn't it time for you to become an adult soon? Gray struggled with his legs. Suho threw him into the middle of the bugs without hesitation. Suho smiled widely at Gray, who was whining and trying to walk away. This world is the weak meat. That surely sounded better. Gray, be the one who eats rather than the one who gets eaten. That's a true predator. After all, he is the descendant of the king of beasts. Suho himself would train him as well. Chomp! He got poisonous insects in his mouth and bit them off. Then, the poison bursting in Suho's mouth filled it like gravy. Suho chewed it all up and swallowed it all at once. Gulp, ring. A harmful substance has been detected. The detoxification begins with the effect of blessing great spellcaster Kandiaru's protection. 3, 2, 1. Detoxification is complete. Suho smiled. It's more edible than I thought. You're crazy. Croatia was shocked. Seeing that, Suho suddenly remembered what Croatia had said. I am originally one in a colony. If all these bugs are part of Croatia, what would happen if he would eat them all? I'm curious. Suho began biting, chewing, and swallowing the bugs that continued to attack him mercilessly. Stop! Stop eating! Each time, Croatia was enraged and she screamed. A huge hand made of insects came out of the air to grab Suho again. Suho avoided the hand and bit another insect. Calm down. There's still plenty of time. Remaining time, 3 hours, 07 minutes, 54 seconds. 3 hours is enough for a mealtime. Thankfully, Suho showed how it was done, so Gray was also eagerly catching and eating insects. He glanced at Suho as if he was anxious that Suho would steal all of his food and eat it. Seeing that, Suho became more motivated. Great, let's see who eats more. You are crazy. Don't compete. Koresha screamed and spurred on the attack. However, no matter what she did, there was no way to stop Suho and Gray. Just how much did they eat? Rakan's advice was effective. Ring, natural enemy of insects, has been acquired. Oh? Suddenly, a system message appeared in Suho's eyes. Title Enemy of Insects, a title given to a predator of insects. Increases all stats by 40% when facing bug-type monsters. Somehow, something similar to the Wolf Slayer title arrived. However, there was no need to visually check the effect of the title. The moment Suho looked at Queratia's bugs, the title, Natural Enemy of Insects, buff effect is activated. Swoosh! The endlessly swarming bugs moved. Instinctively, they realized that Suho was their natural enemy. What's wrong? Suho was suddenly curious. Do bugs like you feel fear? A cruel smile formed on Suho's lips. Kia! A huge wave made up of bugs escaped Suho and scattered away. Right then, huh? Whoa, mysterious light powder was sprinkled over Suho's head. That was the ashes of insects that have died through his hands, the remnants of their soul. The queen of insects, the plague monarch, is being extorted of its pontifex. Chapter 74. Chapter 73. Pontifex? Again? Suho made a puzzled expression. The situation was completely different from that of Rakan, the king of beasts, but a similar result came out. It was because of Gray back then, but Rakan was friendly to him from the beginning, so he gladly made Suho a pontifex for Gray. But this time it's extortion? The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, bursts into laughter as he sees Quaracia's bewildered look. Rakan, you bastard! Quaracia burst into anger at Rakan. How dare you interfere with my sacrifice when you are already dead? Suho finally realized. At first, he thought Rakan's intention was the title, natural enemy of insects. It wasn't. Now, it seemed that Rakan's real intention was to forcibly take the position of pontifex of insects from Quaracia. Suho looked back at the remains of countless insects scattered everywhere around him. All of those were also part of Quaracia's soul. Extortion. Sometimes when you fight with someone, there's when you curse and say, know that today will be your memorial day. But looking at it now, is this enough to be considered holding a memorial service with my own hands? Outside, the Queen Bee Arsha and Lee Minseong were offering countless humans as sacrifices for Quaracia. However, Suho actually sacrificed the ancestral rites inside with Quaracia's own insects. Does this make sense? The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, explains that Quaracia's insects are grudges that were originally eaten by Quaracia. Grudge? So in the end, Suho paid Quaracia the grudge of the dead bugs instead. Ah, so that's why it was the pontifex of insects and not the pontifex of Quaracia. Quaracia is one and a colony. In other words, Suho became a pontifex of Quaracia by offering sacrifices to insects. You won eventually. A declaration of defeat flowed out of Quaracia's mouth. There was still more than enough time before the quest ended, but Quaracia already felt tired, like she aged 100 years. Ha! This bastard is more bug-like than any other bugs. No wonder he wasn't just someone else's son. As the bugs scattered from Quaracia's huge body, their size began to decrease. Then, she transformed into the female body that had fought against Sung Jinwoo a long time ago and landed in front of Suho. Ring. Remaining time, 1 hour, 29 minutes, 34 seconds. You have completed Urgent Quest Quaracia's Solitude. Your level increased. The quest was completed even before 4 hours had finished. The will of Quaracia, who forcibly executed the quest, was completely broken. She glared at Suho with eyes full of bitterness. You know what? It's as if you killed me twice. I'll ask just one thing. Suho interrupted Quaracia and asked directly. Did you plan the disaster outside? Ha, that's absurd. Quaracia bursted into laughter. I am a monarch who died a long time ago. All I can do is wander in the world of nothingness, so what the hell could I have planned? Queen Bee Arsha, also Lee Minseong. Who is that? She doesn't know. Suho was confused. Quaracia had a dull expression, as if she had no interest in the subject. The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, explains that a dead monarch has no influence in the real world without a pontifex. It was just as Rakan said. A dead monarch can do nothing. Rakan also usually fell asleep in the world of nothingness, but was able to wake up and watch the outside world only when Suho did something related to him. It was through a channel called Dream. Same goes with Quaracia. It's really absurd. The way Suho looked at Quaracia changed slightly. Outside, Arsha and Lee Minseong are sacrificing countless lives for the purpose of inheriting Quaracia's power. Who would have thought that Quaracia, the person involved, was unaware of that? I know roughly what the situation is. Quaracia snorted. She collected bugs from the floor, made a chair, and sat cross-legged on it. There have always been bugs targeting my power. Even after I became a monarch, the quarrel continued endlessly. Before she knew it, Quaracia became a proud queen, just like when she first appeared, recalling fierce memories from her previous life. I was the only emperor who survived and reigned in that fierce struggle, and at the same time I was also a prey that could be eaten by someone at any time. A fierce world of eating and being eaten. It was the world of insects. In other words, any insect can become a monarch if they eat me. So the people outside are trying to hold a ceremony to be a successor. You probably mean they're trying to use me and my grudge. The corners of Quaracia's mouth curled up and a mischievous smile formed. That smile somehow looked forced. They don't serve me. They're just hungry demons who want to devour me. Just like what you did to me just now. Suho, embarrassed for nothing, opened his mouth after thinking about it. Didn't taste very good, though. Croatia furiously clenched her two fists that were holding the armrests of her chair. However, she soon smiled and leaned back in her chair. Yeah, well, in the end, if I have to be eaten by someone, it's only natural for me to be eaten by the one who killed me. If your father had been a bug, he would have fully inherited my power right away. The reason he couldn't do that was because Sung Jinwoo was a human, not a bug. It was the same for his son, Suho. No matter how much you ate my bugs here, you will never become the plague monarch. Your qualification itself was not enough. So, just Pontifex after all. Ha, I also had no intention of giving that. Do you think I'm just simply pretty? Anyway, since I was robbed off Pontifex, I would be grateful if you find me a descendant who can inherit my power. Who's pretty? Isn't this pretty enough by human standards? In response to Suho's reply, Croatia showed off her appearance in a female form. Enough with your jokes. What can I do as the Pontifex of insects? In the case of the Pontifex of beasts, the descendant can possess my body. When Suho lifted cute Gray with one hand and showed him, Croatia clicked her tongue. Rakan is also pitiful. His heir is such a clumsy one-day puppy. The king of beasts, the Fang monarch, feels like crying. Suho smiled lightly at Rakan's message and looked at Gray. Fang wolf. Thanks to the hard hunting of insects today, Gray's level doubled. I envy you. Suho's level was now 29. It was only natural that the higher the level, the more experience was needed to level up. Leveling up in such a short amount of time was amazing enough. Considering that time stands still in the real world, it was like he suddenly became stronger in less than a second. Croatia looked at Gray like he was insignificant to the world, but at the same time, she looked envious. Still, I envy Rakan. I can't believe I'm looking for a descendant among blood relatives. There's not a suitable one, so it's impossible to be strong. What? Being the Pontifex of insects is completely useless then. Instead, something else is possible. As soon as Croatia finished speaking, the message window opened in front of Suho. Ring. The quest completion reward has arrived. The following rewards are prepared. Reward. Blessing. Plague protection. This is the protection of the Queen of Insects, the Plague Monarch. The Plague Monarch, Croatia, has chosen you to be her Pontifex. Pontifex can infuse his body with deadly poison. Affect poison. You can freely deal with the ingested poison. Oh. Suho's eyes lit up. Indeed, it was a blessing worthy of the name of the Plague Monarch. Thanks to Kandiaru's blessing, he was immune to all poisons, but now he can handle the poison freely beyond immunity. You can rejoice to your heart's content. From now on, you will become a walking plague. Croatia crossed her arms triumphantly and proudly proclaimed to Suho, "What do you think? It will be much more useful than having a puppy like that on your body." Meanwhile, over the heads of Lim Taegyu and Baek Miho, who entered the beehive at that time, wing! All the clouds in the sky had suddenly turned into swarms of bees. Ugh, this kind of thing is troublesome to deal with. Baek Miho had a puzzled expression. Against such a large number of small monsters, the only thing she could do was to endure with her body. Increase mana power to amplify defense power. However, Lim Taegyu felt more futile. He was an S-class hunter, but he was just an archer. Because of that, most of the skills he had are those related to bows. The new skills he learned by paying expensive money to buy runestones were all things that increased his agility and precision. However, the problem was that Lim Taegyu ingested too much royal jelly, so it was difficult to defend himself with mana powers like Baek Miho. I'm sorry, but I'll be under your care. Why did you have to follow us here? Lim Taegyu hid behind Baek Miho with an embarrassed expression, but then an ominous feeling came over his senses. Wait, those bees. What? At that moment, the bees began to explode on their own. As the golden mist covered the area at the same time as the explosion, Lim Taegyu hurriedly shouted, "Hold your breath. The mist may be the same kind of poison I had been poisoned with." Baek Miho hurriedly held her breath, covering her nose and mouth with her hands. If she becomes addicted to that mist, she might not be able to use mana like Lim Taegyu. Wait, Hunter Sung Suho! Baek Miho suddenly remembered Suho and looked back. She was worried about the safety of Suho, a C-class hunter, in an emergency situation where even A-class herself and S-class Lim Taegyu were in trouble. However, huh? Baek Miho was shocked. Instead of holding his breath, Suho was actually breathing in as much as he could. What? Baek Miho held her breath again when she almost inhaled poison mist while trying to stop Suho. A system message appeared in front of Suho as he smiled strangely. Poison, Lehman's royal jelly, was inhaled. You can handle poison, Minsung's royal jelly. Chapter 75, Chapter 74. The effect of becoming a Pontifex of Kresha was immediately apparent. Not only is he immune to poison, but he is free to handle poison and could use it for attacks. Also, to be able to deal with it freely, does this mean that this is possible? Suho immediately reached out to Baek Miho and Lim Taegyu. Swoosh! Use blessing poison. Baek Miho and Lim Taegyu's eyes widened. The poisonous mist sprayed by the bees began to melt away as soon as it touched the light emitted by Suho. Detoxification skill? Sung Suho, were you a healer, not a summoning hunter? Baek Miho looked confused even as she asked. It was because each and every ability that Suho had shown so far had nothing to do with being a healer. However, Lim Taegyu's eyes were hopeful. If that's the case, you should have done it sooner. Could you help me to detoxify the poison in my body? Lim Taegyu was unable to use his mana as he was suppressing the poison that Secretary O had infused into him earlier. The healer of the Reaper Guild failed to detoxify it, but a healer with a special skill might be able to do so. However, Ring, it cannot be detoxified because it is poison that has not been ingested. A failure. Apparently, the poison Lim Taegyu was infused with was not Lee Minseong's royal jelly, but Arsha's royal jelly. Could he have had Arsha's poison before coming here? It's too late to regret. Right now, it seems difficult to detoxify. Let's deal with them first. Swoosh, arrows were flying from all directions at the same time. Contaminated ghouls hiding everywhere suddenly jumped out and started attacking Suho and his company. I will take care of the ghouls. Baek Miho jumped forward and slammed her fist on the floor. Grumble, skill, vibration of provocation. A circular wave of magic power spread from her fists stuck on the floor. As if possessed by something, the contaminated ghouls all turned around and attacked Baek Miho. Baek Miho fought against them, exuding tremendous energy from her body. Starting with that, Lim Taegyu also ran and engaged in a hand-to-hand fight beside her. The problem was that he knew each and every one of the ghouls' faces. They were the younger brothers who had followed him since the founding of the Reaper Guild. To be in a position to kill them with his own hands. Lee Minseong, what the hell do you want? After all this, what do you want? Lim Taegyu burst into anger and shouted at Lee Minseong, who was hiding somewhere. All I want is just for everyone to just go back to their original places. Lee Minseong's voice echoed in all directions, as if Lee Minseong was in all those bees. Lee Minseong, Lim Taegyu looked around with an angry expression and shouted, Where are you? Don't be cowardly hiding, come out! That moment. Wing! The bees that filled his field of vision began to form a human shape as they came together in a whirlwind. Never hid. Thud. Lee Minseong turned into a human and landed on the ground. The whole area became quiet as if time had stopped. Lee Minseong! Lee Minseong stared at Lim Taegyu with emotionless eyes. I'm in charge of that guy. Lim Taegyu gritted his teeth and attacked Lee Minseong. Baek Miho, who was fighting with the ghouls, shouted urgently. It is dangerous to attack alone. Even so, Lim Taegyu did not stop. Even if he didn't have any skills, he was confident that he could beat Lee Minseong with his force. That confidence is rooted from their level difference. The difference between S-class and A-class that Lee Minseong was so jealous of. But, arrogant bastard, Lee Minseong sneered and scattered again into numerous bees. Swish! Lim Taegyu's punch cut through the air in vain. Lee Minseong came together in human form behind Lim Taegyu's back. Swoosh! Lim Taegyu turned around and attacked Lee Minseong again with his great reflexes. Then, Lee Minseong scattered again. You bastard! Swoosh! Things went on repeatedly. When he suddenly came to his senses, dozens of Lee Minseong clones were standing around Lim Taegyu. What? Those Lee Minseong attacked all at the same time. Sharp spears extended from both of their hands, and their appearance gradually began to change into that of the Queen Bee's lancer. Slash! As the battle continued, Lee Minseong changed his appearance to Queen Bee's lancer. Lim Taegyu panicked and avoided the endless attacks. Fair enough. Suppressing one's mana, but at this level. A useless S-class is still an S-class. Lee Min-sung's voice echoed from all sides, mocked Lim Taegyu and continued to play with him. Young master, in the center of this terrible melee, Beru looked at Suho. That's right. Suho, who was watching the situation, nodded. Then he raised his head and muttered as he glared somewhere. It is all an illusion. To be precise, it was all imitation. Lee Min-sung, who was only a worker bee, did not have the ability to make a lancer like the queen bee Arsha. If that was possible, the ghouls Baek Miho was dealing with would have been lancers, not ghouls in the first place. In the end, it was clear that all of those ghouls were failed attempts by Lee Min-sung to imitate the queen bee and make a lancer. Those lancers that Lim Taegyu was dealing with must also be just an illusionary existence of bees. Beru, any information about the real Lee Min-sung? I'm sorry, but the bees are wandering around and disturbing my senses. Beru has been tracking the true location of Lee Min-sung, constantly flicking his antennae. We should stop for a moment. Suho raised his head and glared at the bees filling his field of vision. Lick. I've already got a taste of them. What kind of taste do these guys here have? Right before, he had been eating Queratia's bugs non-stop, and now they all looked like delicacies. Right then. The title, Natural Enemy of Insects buff effect is activated. The bees that were wandering around were startled and buzzed loudly. Attention from a natural enemy awakened their survival instinct. Title, Natural Enemy of Insects. A title given to a predator of insects. Increases all stats by 40% when facing bug-type monsters. Suho immediately crossed his twin swords. Then, a tremendous amount of energy emerged from Rakan's sword he was holding in his right hand. Use skill, Contempt for the weak. Swoosh! Fear is activated. All stats of the targets are reduced by 50% for 1 minute. The debuff skill of Rakan's sword put opponents weaker than himself into a state of fear. When the effect was combined with the natural enemy of insects, a tremendous synergy was created. Suho's twin swords created a strong wind. Use skill Blade Storm. Swish! It's stronger than usual. A whirlwind of great energy engulfed him so much that he could feel it himself. Suho twisted his whole body and swung the two swords around like windmills. Shh! A terribly violent typhoon caught the bees that filled their field of vision and engulfed them all at once. Everything, including the lancers who surrounded and pressured Lim Taegyu. You have killed the contaminated wasp. 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 Countless bees were crushed. Messages were pouring in. Along with that, the level of skill Blade Storm increased. Suho became even stronger. Whoa, how could he be this powerful? Lim Taegyu, who hurriedly escaped thanks to the storm, looked back at Suho with a shocked expression. Wasn't he also a healer? Suho's current appearance was neither a summoning hunter nor a healer in any way. What kind of summoning hunter and healer could use such powerful attack skills? Lim Taegyu felt that everything he knew about hunters was being shattered. The reality was that the synergy between the title effect buff and the item buff boosted Suho's power, but Lim Taegyu, who was unaware of such a situation, could not help but be astonished. Lee Min-sung? What happened to Lee Min-sung? He suddenly came to his senses and hurriedly turned his gaze to the place where Lee Min-sung was. All those Lee Min-sung were caught in the storm and scattered. In the place where the storm had passed, Beru shouted after breaking the momentary silence. I found him. As soon as Beru's words were finished, Suho's sword cut through the air as it protruded forward. Crackle! Then, the vacuum of nothingness was shattered. Everything started to fall apart. Damn it, you found me well. From beyond that hidden space, ferocious eyes glared at Suho. Through the cracks in the fragmented air, Lee Min-sung slowly walked out. But his look, it doesn't say contaminated. Suho found it strange. Was it because he was an A-class hunter? Unlike the contaminated lancers he encountered so far, Lee Min-sung was the first non-contaminated one to appear. A humanoid soldier whose entire body is armed like armor. He was exuding the most powerful aura among the lancers Suho had ever met. You said you weren't going to hide, but you were hiding? Normally, it's out of character for the king to step out directly where his servants play. When Suho laughed at him, Min-sung smiled as if he found it funny. Those words were true. Strong. Flutter. From the moment he met him, Suho's senses stats were sending warnings like crazy. He's the strongest among the monsters I've met so far. But, compared to the dead monarchs, he was absurdly weak. Since Suho had already met Queratia, the queen of insects, he wasn't discouraged by the overwhelming sense of intimidation emanating from Lee Min-sung. However, Baek Miho and Lim Taegyu were different. And no way. How did Min-sung get this kind of power? He was the strongest soldier bee created by Queen Bee Arsha with great care. The powerful aura felt from the demonic beast born for battle was giving them a terrible sense of despair. In particular, to Baek Miho, who has developed a sense of wildness more than anyone else, Lee Min-sung felt like an incredibly gigantic being. However, what Lim Taegyu, an S-class hunter, felt was humiliation. Ugh, if only I could use my mana. No matter how strong Lee Min-sung became, he was confident that he could deal with him if he got his usual strength. But that was impossible now. Right then, Suho spoke to them, who were completely frozen. Let's join forces. What? Huh? What are you looking at? Will you run away then? Suho's words made them think if they should retreat and bring in fellow hunters. We're in a mess right now, so let's attack all at once instead of splitting the tanks and attackers. Suho's strategy was simple. Since he hides well, let's rip his wings first so that he can't run away, and beat him all together until he dies. Min-sung laughed at Suho's words. Ridiculous. Are you saying you're going to deal with me on your own? Me, who will become the king of insects? Ah, the king of insects? Suho also laughed at him genuinely. Lick. Didn't taste very good, though. Chills. Why? Min-sung suddenly felt uncomfortable with Suho. Queen of Insects, Plague Monarch, shakes her head, saying that she has been caught by a terrible one. I wonder what your poison would taste like. Chapter 76, Chapter 75. Lee Min-sung managed to escape from Queen Bee Arsha, but after that, he had to run away while being hunted by contaminated lancers. The lancers were obviously weaker than Min-sung, but it was impossible to kill them. Every time he tried to kill them, a powerful message resonated in his head, causing him to suffer from a tremendous headache. Be loyal to the queen. Be loyal to the queen. Ack! Shut up! Shut up! He really seemed to almost lose it. If he didn't try to counter his mind for even just for a while, his desire to return to the queen bee on his own and kneel down to swear allegiance surged up. Be loyal to the queen. Stop! Stop! Please get out of my head! He tried everything to get the voice out of his head, but to no avail. Even when he plugged his ears and banged his head on the floor, the voice didn't stop. That was natural. It wasn't a voice in the first place. It was the instinct of a worker bee reborn for the queen bee. For Lee Min-sung, who always reigned over others, it was a very humiliating feeling. Be loyal to the queen. I refuse. I'm not a worker bee. He gritted his teeth and forcibly suppressed his instincts. Ironically, the place where he managed to avoid the pursuit of the lancers was the vice president's office of the Reaper Guild. Who? Yes, my place is right here. It's not like a beehive. He was breathing heavily and was about to take a bottle of wine from the cellar and drink it as usual, but his expression changed. It was because of this. The wine in his hand was the culprit of that situation he was in. A high-quality wine and royal jelly that the lady always gave him as a gift whenever he went to Queen Bee. That was the queen bee's poison. I drank this every day. That was why I'm like this. Lee Min-sung held the wine bottle high to throw it, but hesitated for a moment. Hold on a second. When he thought of the queen bee's poison, he suddenly had a good idea. He came up with a way to suppress the worker bee's instincts. By using that, maybe I can create my own corp. Lee Min-sung poured his mana energy into the royal jelly. He changed the properties of royal jelly to his own preferences. Great. Now, if you are poisoned by this, you will turn into a soldier loyal to me, not the queen bee. Lee Min-sung absorbed the newly prepared royal jelly into his stinger. Then he went outside and attacked the lower-level hunters and injected them with royal jelly. Somehow, they died right on the spot. Squeaklings. Can't even stand this much poison. Lee Min-sung clicked his tongue and went find stronger intermediate hunters. However, the results were the same for intermediate hunters. They all vomited blood and were poisoned to death. Why do you keep dying? He was confused. Was there something wrong with the royal jelly? Until he found out why, he continued to attack the hunters over and over again. Then, finally, he saw a positive light. His target was the Reaper Guild he belonged to. Coincidence? At first he thought it was just a coincidence, but it wasn't. No matter how many times he tried it, the only ones who survived the royal jelly without dying were the hunters of the Reaper Guild. How is this possible? Eventually, Lee Min-sung found the reason. Could it be that they were the ones who followed me from the beginning? Royal jelly was a poison for worker bees. The object of that loyalty was, of course, the queen bee. But I am not a queen. Even if they were forced to be loyal to Lee Min-sung, who was at most the same worker bee, there was no worker bee to devote their allegiance to. However, only the members of the Reaper Guild, who were originally his subordinates, were an exception. Loyalty to Vice President Lee Min-sung was basically engraved in their heads. The reason for that loyalty was only a thin master-servant relationship tied to annual salary and rank, but ironically, it was the most tightly bound master-servant relationship among humans. With that logic, Lee Min-sung bursted into laughter. Then, the royal jelly with my magic could only be eaten by the members of the Reaper Guild? That's funny. Really interesting. Somehow, he thought that the appearance of the slaves he made with his own royal jelly was very different from the ones who resemble soldiers. The slaves of Lee Min-sung were reborn as contaminated ghouls that looked more like humans than bees. This may also be destiny. It was better. Using that ability, he might be able to steal everything from Lim Taegyu, that lucky bastard. The position of guild leader was not suitable for such a guy like him from the beginning. Lim Taegyu looked better when he was my driver. I'm going to poison him and make him my slave. Min-sung had no idea if even an S-class would be affected by his royal jelly, but if he succeeded, it would be a jackpot. Taegyu was once a driver who obeyed his words, so the possibility was high enough. He felt better when he thought of enslaving Lim Taegyu. Being reborn as a worker bee wasn't all bad. Except for the instinct to be loyal to the queen bee, there were many more good things. The queen bee suppressed all of Lee Min-sung's nature as a human, reinventing him as a highly evolved form of a fighter. It's a little disappointing that all the skills he had when he was a human disappeared because of that. But after all, skills were for combat anyway. By condensing all that power, he obtained a transcendent body specialized in combat, so the gains were rather large. He wondered if he could beat Lim Taegyu if he was in his current state now. Although he is S-class, Lim Taegyu is nothing more than an archer who shoots an arrow from behind. If I poison him first and then disable his weapon, I stand a good chance. That was how Lee Min-sung came that far. All of his plans have been successful so far, and as a result, Lim Taegyu was now standing in front of him looking exhausted. I can win now. Lee Min-sung was confident. He would beat Lim Taegyu with his own hands, trample on his face, and spit on him. And, like before the cataclysm, he planned to make him his slave and use him for the rest of his life. Who the hell is that human next to him? Lee Min-sung felt an ominous feeling when he saw Suho next to Lim Taegyu. It was like having the queen bee in front of him. No, if that person were the queen bee, he would have felt more of a forcing loyalty, but he felt the opposite from Suho. Fear. As if facing a natural enemy, pure fear welled up. Why? Does he seem to look very strong? After becoming a worker bee, Lee Min-sung's sense of estimating the opponent's level was extremely developed. Judging by the mana power that he felt from Suho, he was clearly a C-class hunter. No matter how well he attacked, it would only be at the level of a B-class hunter. In fact, the more threatening being than him was Baek Miho, an A-class hunter next to Suho. But why? Why did he want to run away from there right now? Why did he become as stiff as a frog in front of a snake? Natural enemy of insects. The uneasy feeling touched Lee Min-sung's ego. He gives off a very bad aura. He worked hard to shake off the anxiety he felt and showed his strength. A tremendous energy surged from him. On the other hand, Suho felt the opposite. He's obviously stronger than me. I don't think he'll ever lose. Suho immediately opened the shop window. You purchased item quiver. In an instant, 2 heavy quivers were in Suho's hands. If you can't use magic arrows, use these instead. Lim Taegyu, who was suddenly handed a quiver, looked at Suho with his eyes wide open. From where did? Summoning Hunter. Suho shrugged his shoulders, skipping over the explanations. Of course it's not free. You'll be billed for it later, so maximize its use. I will give you some again when you have used it all. Oh yes, thank you. Lim Taegyu nodded with a bright expression. Now it didn't matter if Suho was a healer or a summoning hunter, such concerns can be dealt with later. Immediately, Lim Taegyu turned his head toward the enemies, and his expression suddenly changed. The Reaper's bow was an S-class weapon that could kill mages with an ordinary arrow. The moment Korea's strongest S-class archer held it, he truly became a hunter. Swoosh! Lim Taegyu's arrows pierced the heads and hearts of the ghouls attacking from all sides. Leave all these to me, and you guys catch Lee Min-sung. He wanted to beat Lee Min-sung directly, but he had already confirmed that it was impossible now that he does not have mana power. An all-out battle began. Let's go! Yes! Suho and Miho went after Lee Min-sung. Kirk! At that moment, the wings of the Shadow Lancers sprouted from Suho and Miho's backs. Swish! They flew towards Lee Min-sung at breakneck speed and launched an onslaught. Swoosh! Slow. However, Lee Min-sung laughed at them and easily avoided the attacks. How can he have that speed? Baek Miho hurriedly gave a warning to Suho at Lee Min-sung's movement. Suho, be careful. Based on his speed alone, he's far beyond A-class. Lee Min-sung was delighted at those words. The corners of his mouth twitched with an ecstatic expression. Haha, that's right. I'm already beyond human. Your slow bursting attacks can't even touch my body. Oh, really? Flinch. Suho's trivial reply made Lee Min-sung feel uncomfortable. No matter how much he tried to ignore it, Suho's existence itself is so strong. I can't do this. I'll kill you first. Lee Min-sung flew towards Suho in full momentum. The moment the sharp spear in his hand is about to pierce Suho's heart. Swish. Suho laughed. I've been waiting for this moment. Suho's thoughts raged with his eyes shimmering. Come out! Swoosh! Suddenly, numerous black beams of light emanated from Suho's body and rushed toward Lee Min-sung at the same time. Is this? Lee Min-sung's eyes widened as he was taken aback. It was visible to the perspective of a worker bee that transcended humans. The identity of those beams of light. Lancers. The queen bee's lancers who had been chasing him so tenaciously had appeared. This is ridiculous. Lee Min-sung was frightened and hurriedly changed direction just before attacking Suho. Besides, his speed was much faster than those guys. Even if they were too close, he could escape. Suho suddenly grabbed the tip of Lee Min-sung's spear, which was about to pierce his heart. Caught it, you bastard. Let go. Lee Min-sung tried with all his might to defeat Suho, but it's already too late. Kill him. The spears of the Shadow Lancers flying from all sides began to mercilessly slaughter Lee Min-sung's body. Chapter 77, Chapter 76. Countless black streaks of light struck Lee Min-sung like thunder and lightning. Blag, he fell to the floor and let out a tremendous roar. Baek Miho immediately followed him to the ground and plunged her fist straight into his abdomen. Bang! Ack! Lee Min-sung's eyes opened and he vomited blood from his mouth. Let's fight here. Baek Miho, with a raging gaze, swung her both hands. Skill, Beast Claw. Slash, Baek Miho attacked Lee Min-sung without a break. If she stopped even for a moment, she could miss him. I don't know what happened, but I can't miss this opportunity. She was taken aback by Suho's sudden ability, but if she missed such an opportunity, Lee Min-sung could run away at great speed. Baek Miho spurred on the attack, and Lee Min-sung suddenly came to his senses and fought back. Speed was definitely Lee Min-sung's advantage, but numerous Shadow Lancers constantly harassed him to fill that agility gap. He could not hide his confused expression. How? What happened? How did the Lancers suddenly appear? What the hell does that human have to do with the queen bee? Numerous question marks filled Lee Min-sung's head. The moment he saw Suho attacking him, he felt a surge of complex emotions. What kind of relationship do you have with the queen bee? Bang! Lee Min-sung's attack was directed at Suho. Common sense made him think that it's only right to Baek Miho, who is stronger than Suho, but Lee Min-sung could not think rationally. He realized what that terrible emotion was. Jealousy. Why did the queen bee give the Lancers to someone like you? He used to deny it with all his body, but there was one truth that never changed. That's right. The queen bee's favorite and strongest worker bee is me. Me, Lee Min-sung. Not someone like you. Lee Min-sung's raging attack crumbled the whole area like a bomber. Baek Mi-ho hurriedly unfolded her defense skills. Hide behind me, Suho. But instead of retreating, Suho jumped forward. Oh my. Baek Mi-ho couldn't help but doubt her own eyes. In front of her, Lee Min-sung's spear and Suho's sword were fighting fiercely. Lee Min-sung's speed was obviously overwhelmingly faster than Suho's. However, Suho never stopped attacking, taking all the unblockable attacks with his bare body. She couldn't help but be surprised at that terribly tough defense. Was he a tank and not a summoning hunter? She was so confused. In the end, she gave up thinking about it, but there was some truth to what she was thinking. Skill, tenacity level increased, physical defense plus 60% 80%. Great, I'll be able to hold out longer with this. Fighting with all his might, Suho's mind was extremely rational. Body hot, head cold. He was fighting, checking his HP and MP every moment while looking at the status window. Since Lee Min-sung was such a strong enemy, there was no room to use the skills that sucked mana in real time. It was suicidal to grow in size with the giant's armor against a fast enemy. Even if he tried to amplify his speed by strengthening Gray, the limit was only a few minutes. Even if he didn't use a skill, he was attacking with mana energy, so he needed to fight while conserving his mana thoroughly. Eventually, it's just the spiritual body manifestation. Among his skills, the one that boasted the most destructive power was definitely spiritual body manifestation. However, it was also a skill that consumed mana in real time, and in order to hit an attack against such a fast enemy, he had to be prepared. Suho ordered the Shadow Lancers, "Tie that bastard's feet, tear off his wings, attack the legs." A truly cruel order, but rather, it was the Shadow Lancers who were torn apart. How dare you? In the hands of Lee Min-sung, the Lancers' heads were cut and a huge hole was pierced in their chests. It was just the beginning. As Suho's mana decreased, the fragmented bodies of the Shadow Lancers turned into black steam and began to reattach. Lee Min-sung was greatly shocked by that. No way. That's just impossible. The jealousy towards a fellow Lancer surged up in his heart. Why didn't the Queen Bee give me the ability to regenerate? Could it be that the Queen was afraid that I would become too strong? Of course not. However, Lee Min-sung's misunderstanding became the incarnation of jealousy and grew out of control. He realized one thing. He was originally unable to attack the Lancers sent by the Queen Bee. But now, for some reason, the attack was possible. What does that mean? That's right. Ha ha! I'm already completely free of the Queen Bee. As expected, creating my own corp was the answer. Lee Min-sung burst into laughter with a face full of joy. He defeated the Lancers and attacked Suho. But at that moment, chills! He saw something. Swoosh, a huge shadow behind Suho's back. The illusion of something huge like a mountain looking down on him with an arrogant gaze. The Queen of Insects, the Plague Monarch, is watching Lee Min-sung. In front of that mighty gaze, he became a tiny and shabby insect, trembling before he knew it. Then, the stop time started to flow again. Lee Min-sung's spirit suddenly returned to reality, and the huge shadow was nowhere to be seen. Did I just see something? He didn't know what it was, but Lee Min-sung decided to run right away. Besides, my intended purpose was all accomplished. Lee Min-sung's gaze turned to Lim Taegyu, who was shooting arrows at the ghouls from afar. I don't know how the ghouls poisoned him. It was clear that Lim Taegyu was suffering from the poison. He managed to suppress the poison with his mana powers, but that will eventually reach its limit. It doesn't matter if I lose all the ghouls I've collected so far. I just need to catch Lim Taegyu. With that, he would be able to take on an S-class hunter as a worker bee. Lee Min-sung was mistaken. Unaware of the fact that Secretary O betrayed Lim Taegyu, Lee Min-sung mistook him for being addicted to his royal jelly. Okay, I'll run away first. No one will be able to detoxify Lim Taegyu's poison anyway, so I just have to hide quietly and wait until he gets completely poisoned. As soon as he thought about it, he immediately turned around and ran. Make sure to not miss him. Immediately, Suho chased Lee Min-sung with the Shadow Lancers. You got caught, you bastard! Seizing the momentary gap, Lee Min-sung suddenly turned to Suho again. Before I go, you! Lee Min-sung's magic exploded toward Suho. No! Baek Mi-ho hurriedly ran from behind, but it was too late. Bang! There was an explosion of highly concentrated magical power. Ack! Suho opened his eyes. It wasn't him who received the attack. Lim Taeyu suddenly got in between the two and received the attack by Lee Min-sung instead of Suho. Even Lee Min-sung was taken aback by the completely unexpected situation. Lim Taegu, you bastard! Yes, it is me, you son of a bitch. Lim Taegu looked straight into Lee Min-sung's eyes and smiled. Blood poured out of his mouth. However, even in the midst of such pain, his two hands firmly gripped the spear of Lee Min-sung, which was stuck in his stomach, and did not let go. No matter how hard Lee Min-sung tried, his spear could not be pulled out. Lim Taegu still had the physicality of an S-class hunter. Lim Taegu. Lee Min-sung desperately struggled with Lim Taegu. What are you thinking? Don't tell me you're going to die with me. Why would I, bastard? Lim Taegu struggled to answer those words. It's because of me that you have such a bad temper, right? At those words, Lee Min-sung's body suddenly stiffened. Looking straight into his bloodshot eyes, Lim Taegu muttered with a smile. So you have to take responsibility, at least as a business partner. Lim Taegu was truly sorry. It hasn't been more than 2 years since they fought. Before that, they were close friends. How did everything happen? What is this mana power? What is awakening? Nong? Why is a guy who was born with everything jealous of me? So Min-sung, swoosh, Lim Taegyu's mana, which had been suppressed until now, suddenly began to surge. At the same time, the royal jelly's poison tried to invade his brain, but everything would end before that. I really can't see my friend getting beaten up by others, so if you will die, just die in my hands. Nonsense, it is you who will die. Lee Min-sung roared and attacked Lim Taegu with his other hand. Swoosh! Suho, like a thunderbolt, got in between the two. Both of Lee Min-sung's arms were cut off by his twin swords. Lee Min-sung's eyes widened. You talk a lot. Suho, who had been waiting for the moment Lee Min-sung was tied up, poured all his strength towards him. You skill, spiritual body manifestation. Spiritual body manifestation, the power of Amut, which raised even a small and insignificant goblin into an iron body monarch. A large, black energy enveloped Suho's arm and spread out as a sword. Swoosh! Suho did not stop attacking, like a giant hand crushing a small bug to death, again and again. It was ruthless violence against Lee Min-seong. No way. Lee Min-seong, who lost both arms, couldn't even scream properly, and had no choice but to suffer with all the attacks. Why is this guy? He just couldn't believe the situation. It would be better if it was Lim Taegu, an S-class hunter, but he couldn't accept the fact that he was being treated so badly by an unknown kid. But it hurt. All of Suho's attacks were so painful. The worst of all, Lim Taegu was watching his desperate appearance and muttered something. He couldn't hear anything. Lee Min-sung, who was already battered, couldn't hear a thing. He got up with his last breath and attacked Suho. At the same time, Suho's huge black fist and numerous black lancers attacks rained on Min-sung's body. Blag! Chapter 78. Chapter 77. Phew. When Suho stopped attacking, a heavy silence came. As Lee Min-sung died, the contaminated ghouls around him collapsed at once like a puppet with a thread cut off. The contaminated wasps that filled the ominous sky also disappeared. Oh my god! Baek Miho, who was running to help Suho, stood there blankly staring at Suho. It was an absolutely unbelievable sight. A C-class hunter crushed an A-class villain by force. As expected, that person. Baek Miho went on her way to guess Suho's identity. Meanwhile, in that suffocating silence, Suho himself was busy reading the noisy system messages. Ring, 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 ring. The Queen's Lancer has been defeated. Your level increased? Your level increased? Your level increased? Oh, great. Climbing 3 levels at once was worth the hard work. Suho's level was now at 32. Surprisingly, however, the message did not end there. Ring. The player has reached the required level. You have met the completion conditions of Secret Quest Qualification of Corps Commander. There are unread messages. Required level? Qualification of Corps Commander? Suho, who was trying to check the message with a puzzled expression, suddenly stumbled. Grumble. Suddenly, the floor started shaking as if it were about to collapse. No, that space itself was about to collapse. Young master, you must get out of here immediately. Beru urgently shouted at Suho. The sky was also being torn apart. If it was too late, you could be trapped here forever. Lee Min-sung made numerous sacrifices and forcibly brought such an incomplete dungeon, the sanctuary of insects, to Earth. That was the role of a pontifex that Queen Bee Arsha wanted. However, at the same time as Lee Min-sung's death, the coercive power disappeared, and the sanctuary was about to return to the dimensional rift. Come on, let's get out of here. Suho put off checking the message and looked back at Baek Miho and Lim Taegyu. Lim Taegyu, who was staring at the dead Lee Min-sung, immediately closed his eyes and turned around. Then he glanced at Suho, feeling conflicted, and opened his mouth. I have a lot to ask you, but I'll do it once we get out of here. Me too, Baek Miho added. The three hurriedly escaped from the insect sanctuary. However, just before Suho left the sanctuary, he suddenly stopped and glanced back. It took a lot of hard work to catch him. It's a waste to throw him away. He reached out his hand toward Lee Min-sung's body lying on the ground. Ruler's power. Swook, an invisible hand lifted one of Min-sung's arms, which Suho had cut off. It was already in a deformed shape to be called a human arm. The lancer's arm, which had a long spear instead of a hand, moved towards Suho like a magnet. Right after that, Suho smiled meaningfully and escaped from the sanctuary. The post-processing was carried out swiftly the moment Lee Min-sung, the main culprit, died. All the ghouls that were rampaging in the city stopped moving at once, and all of those disasters ended at once. This was the result of the loss of power from the contaminated royal jelly of Min-sung, which corrupted their bodies. Afterwards, Lim Taegyu immediately called a healer specializing in detoxification and received treatment. He was barely able to break free from the poison. Ha! I almost died this time. In the future, should I have any kind of a court lady or so? I have to choose my next assistant as a healer specializing in detoxification. Lim Taegyu repeats his resolutions with an exhausted expression. Meanwhile, Baek Miho mobilized all the manpower of the Baekho Guild and took the lead in securing casualties and missing persons. Reaper Guild was not in a position to do so. The incident was somehow solved, but the Reaper Guild had lost so many things due to that. Fortunately, most of the elite B-class or higher were still alive, but the loss of most of the hunters C-class or lower was a big blow. Well, they would just have to recruit new ones, but who will? I'll try to join our guild now. I'm worried that those who were there will also leave. Phew. Lim Taegyu raised his head and blankly looked up at the sky where Lee Min-sung's beehive was. For some reason, he had a vision of the dead Lee Min-sung raising his middle finger up in the sky. That damn bastard. This must be why my mom told me to make good friends. Oh right, Secretary O. Lim Taegyu suddenly remembered Secretary O, who betrayed him. He hurriedly looked around. However, no matter how much he searched for him, Secretary O's whereabouts were already unknown. Weird. It felt strange. Secretary O was a secretary he personally selected. He had a moderate personality and was a good guy at work. Since when was he a traitor? Was he even human in the first place? At that time, Secretary O was watching them all with an expressionless face, mingling with the crowd. He turned his back as he walked away from the scene. Wing! As the bees flapped their wings, without anyone noticing, the face changed to that of Queen Bee Arsha. However, Arsha's expression looked more depressed than Lim Taegyu's. It's futile. Lee Min-sung died, and the sacrifices also perished. All the plans she had prepared so far collapsed overnight. The plan was perfect. Yes, looking back, her plan was perfect. Hide in the shade and make a hideout. There, she gradually increased the number of worker bees. I put my heart and soul into making followers, offering sacrifices for the dead, Croatia. In the middle, Lee Min-sung ran away, but that level of error was not a big problem. Rather, it served as a catalyst to accelerate her plans. The only cause of defeat was that human. Arsha caught the sight of Suho in the distance. She also thought he was ominous from the first time she saw him. As expected, she should have killed him earlier, but instead, only her worker bees were taken away by him. It has become an urgent situation even for oneself to survive right now than to think of revenge. Is this the power of descendants? There was a strong desire in Arsha's eyes looking at Suho. All right, I'll admit it. From the moment she got involved with that human, she had no chance of winning, because he is the descendant of Rakan. As expected, he was the heir of the King of Beasts, the Fang Monarch. It was natural that she would not be able to deal with him with her own power, as she had not yet become a monarch. So, she wanted more. If I become a monarch, I will have that kind of power. Fortunately, the succession of the plague monarch did not happen there today. She confirmed the most important fact with her own eyes. I'm leaving for today, Beast King Crow. But someday definitely. Swallowing back words, Arsha's body scattered on the spot. Returning home, Suho had 2 business cards in his hand. The owners of the business cards were Baek Miho and Lim Taegyu. Korean hunters receive business cards from the president and vice president of large guilds that everyone was eager to enter. I'm busy today, so I just let it go. Be sure to contact us tomorrow. It is a must. The 2 forcibly put the business card in Suho's hand, even while he was frantically answering questions from reporters flocking to do post-processing. Still feeling uneasy, they even took Suho's phone number. It feels like I was casted on the street for some reason. That's not quite wrong. Beru responded to Suho's words with a proud expression. Like when you get recruited on the streets for looking too good, young master is also very good at fighting. When did you grow up so great? That's too much. Leaving Beru, who was shedding tears of emotion, Suho roughly threw the business cards on the desk. It's good to join a large guild. It wasn't just a popular name or a big company. Even if the salary wasn't high, the welfare of a large guild was truly enormous. Depending on the class or experience, one can borrow expensive, high-quality equipment. Large guilds were also equipped with a spacious and sturdy training center that would not collapse even if members used their mana to their heart's content. Other hunters don't grow through leveling up like Suho. That's why they needed more training. It was to use the power given to them more efficiently and strategically. The problem was that I already have them all. Good weapon? Suho had a shop window. As long as his gold was enough, he could buy any equipment he wanted. A large training camp? Is there another hunter in the world who has a personal training ground as big and wide as Suho's? Suho immediately inserted the key into his shadow. Are you going in right away? Yeah, I have something to check. Clack. Would you like to enter the shadow dungeon? Yes. Entering the shadow dungeon. Swoosh! In an instant, Suho's vision turned black and white. Before he knew it, the place where he was standing was the Shadow Dungeon's strength training center, the Pyramid of Ammit. There, Ammit, who was waiting for Suho to come, stood up with his gigantic body and a vicious smile. You are finally here. Let's start training. Wait a minute. Not yet. As soon as Suho saw him, he hurriedly dissuaded Ammit, who was about to start spiritual body manifestation training. Ammit frowned as he tried to transform into a spirit body. Do you have anything else to do? Yes, there are other important things to do. Suho let out a sigh of relief and checked the message flickering in front of his eyes from earlier. You have met the completion conditions of Secret Quest, Qualification of Corps Commander. There are unread messages. After taking a short, deep breath, Suho immediately checked the message. Secret Quest, Qualifications of Corps Commander. A player has proven himself or herself by reaching the required level. Become a Shadow Legion commander and raise your own crops. This can't be. Suho's eyes widened. Swoosh! Under Suho's feet, the shadow moved on its own and began screaming silently. The sound was grand like a military song of brave soldiers leaving the battlefield, or grotesque like a solemn requiem. Ring. You have learned skill Shadow Save. Shadow Save? Before Suho could finish his words, Beru was startled and screamed. Oh my God, finally young master has been recognized by his majesty. Chapter 79, Chapter 78. So far, Suho had released and used a variety of shadow soldiers. There were quite a few useful soldiers among them, but unfortunately they were only one-day mercenaries. That had been the case up until now. Black bees flocked at the sky. If there was a grave spider arachne, it would have sprung a web right away and tied up the bees in an instant. However, Arachne had already gone back to nothing, and Suho had to deal with all those tiny mobs one by one. There was something that Beru once said to Suho. Only a monarch can command corps. Although Suho inherited the shadow power thanks to his father, he was not the shadow monarch himself. In order to become a monarch, a vacancy was needed, and it would exist when the current monarch died. However, Sung Jinwoo was already an immortal being. With that, Suho could forever not become the Shadow Monarch. But then, Beru said clearly, "Young Master does not have the authority to handle Corp yet." He said, "Yet." That very moment finally came to Suho. Skill, shadow power, no mana cost. Shadow soldiers are stored in the caster's shadow. Stored soldiers can be summoned or stored back whenever the caster wishes. Number of stored shadows, 0-1. Oh wow. Suho's eyes widened as he checked the skill window. Above his head, Beru was flying round and round, shedding tears of joy. "Ick! You must be so thrilled. His Majesty has finally allowed young Master to have a private soldier." A private soldier, Suho muttered. In the end, there was still a level limitation. Level is, after all, an indicator that the system easily recognizes, limiting the protection. If power were to be given to low-ranking ones, they would rather be consumed by the energy of death and become a shadow soldier. Storing the soldier of death in one's shadow was the same as saying that death always followed beneath one's feet. Now, he finally has the authority to lead a private soldier. What was important to Suho was, after all, numbers. Number of saved shadows. Just 1. Suho sneered. That was probably because his level was also low. It's like saying I need to increase the number by myself 1 by 1. It will also be affected by the intellect stat, just like the shadow release skill. Suho suddenly remembered the time when he was young and sat side by side with his father to play games. At that time, his father would often nag him saying, "How can you fall asleep with that level? Somehow, even if we play the same game, you level up so fast. Leveling up was your main job. Which one do you plan to save as the first soldier?" Suho, who had escaped from his thoughts at Beru's question, responded with a smirk. "Why are you asking? You already know." Of course, the one he had been having the most trouble with lately. Suho put down one side of Lee Min-sung's arm, which he had brought with him, on the floor. Shadow release is possible on this target. Shadow release was possible even with only a part of the corpse. After all, the body is just a medium. A dark aura was already moving around Lee Min-sung's arm. An ominous cry echoed in the shadows. Lee Min-sung was screaming to get him out of that hell. The aura was frighteningly ferocious. "Okay, if you want it that much, I'll take you out." Suho stretched out his hand towards him. "Arise." A black shadow began to wriggle. Attempting release. In the shadows, Lee Min-sung's face stretched out and opened his mouth. However, ring. A notification popped up with the sound of metal snapping. Shadow release failed. You have 2 more chances left. Failed? Suho's eyes narrowed. He wasn't too surprised because he expected failure to some extent. Shadow release increases the probability of release failure in proportion to the target's ability level. Lee Min-sung was an A-class hunter with much more mana power than Suho, and the latter did not fight alone to win in the first place. That's why he's more coveted. Suho remembered. Lee Min-sung, the strongest lancer, was developed by Queen Bee Arsha with great care. Even so, if he could reap that arrogant fellow who voluntarily escaped from the Queen Bee for his own purposes as his own soldier, the thought alone made his heart swell. 2 chances left. After taking a deep breath, Suho calmly attempted the second release. Arise. Ring. Shadow release failed. You have 1. I'm getting dizzy. He expected it, but he couldn't help but be nervous when there was only 1 chance left. Ah! Even at that moment, Lee Min-sung was struggling to get out of the black smoke. Do you want to come out too? He felt his eagerness. Suho's eyes grew serious. You must have been jealous of my shadow lancers. Lee Min-sung had shown jealousy when he saw the lancers who resurrected even if they died while fighting him. Why didn't the Queen Bee give me the ability to regenerate? Could it be that she was afraid that I would become too strong? He was seriously mistaken. In the first place, that power was not something a Queen Bee could give. Come to me. I'll make you the strongest lancer. Suho's eyes flashed with strong will. Arise. That moment. Ah! Min-sung roared and came out of the black smoke. Then, the black smoke that followed began to form a body that was not yet completed. Shadow release succeeded. Finally, Suho bursted into relief. However, it did not seem to be a complete resurrection. A strong desire led to the fighting spirit of the dead. However, the power of the shadow soldier is weakened because the dead stats are too high compared to the casters. The level of the shadow starts at 2. Weakened to level 2, Suho made a puzzled expression. What level was it originally? Aft 2, Night Class Thud. Eventually, a lancer made of black steam landed on one knee in front of Suho and bowed his head. Greetings to my master. Huh? You can talk? Suho and Beru's eyes widened at the same time. The other Shadow Lancers couldn't speak. Only this one had that ability. Is it because it's a night class? I don't think so. In order to be able to speak normally, you need to be at least general class. Or was it really necessary? Beru, too, looked perplexed. Maybe it's because young master has been playing with the shadow soldiers since he started babbling. In the end, they can only speculate on the effects of talent and early education. Ring. Names can be given to soldiers of night class or higher. The given name remains until the shadow disappears. Please specify the soldier's name. Suho pondered for a moment. Name. The name Lee Min-sung was so infamous that he did not want to use it as it was. All right. Since Lee Min-sung wanted to succeed Queratia, Quay. Do you want to use Quay? Yeah. As soon as Suho finished speaking, a new name was engraved instead of the question mark above the Shadow Lancer's head. Night Class, thank you for the great name. Lee Min-sung, who was born again under the name of Quay, smiled faintly and stood up. When he was alive, long poisonous needles sprouted like spears in both hands instead of his hands, but now that he was born again, only one poisonous needle was attached to it, and the other hand was a normal hand. Is it because I only cut off one arm? While taking a look at Quay, Beru flew up and mocked Lee Min-sung. Keh, I feel sorry for you. A guy who was once so strong was only a level 2 knight now. However, Quay only snorted at Beru's provocation. Ha, I can't believe this. You of all people dare to laugh at me? Beru's ego was pierced and he flinched. Pawn class. For reference, the current mini Beru's rating was far below. This is not my real self. The same goes for me. The important thing is the present, right? What? How dare the distant successor speak back? Says the pawn. Beru was genuinely enraged, and Quay indifferently looked at him with arms crossed. In the middle of a bloody nerve war between the two, Suho said a word. Quay. Yes, master. What is it? Show some respect to the elderly. Elderly? Quay's eyes widened in surprise at those words. However, the body had already obeyed the command and immediately bowed his head. Young master, why are you? Beru is like the uncle who raised me. You'll get in trouble if you mess around. Young master? Beru flew in with tears of emotion and clung to Suho's head. At the same time, he glanced at Quay with a side eye and began to chuckle coolly. Looking at it now, you're level 2 because you're number 2. As if those words touched the wrath, Quay's face crumpled as if he hit his head on the floor. We'll see, you bastard. It seemed that the war of nerves between the two would continue. A pretty useful-looking soldier. Where did you get this guy from? Amut, who was watching what Suho was doing from the side, was looking over at Quay amusingly. Suho told him everything that had happened that day, and Amut bursted out laughing when he heard the story. You still have a long way to go. You mean you struggled because of just a few bugs? There weren't just a few. Even Master would have had a hard time, I bet. Sounds funny. Even if hundreds or millions of those bugs come at once, they can't do any damage to me. It was not an exaggeration. Amut's thick skin is a kind of full body armor itself made of steel. With that solid defensive power, he would have ignored all attacks, strode towards the captain, and trample him on. I have more questions other than that. What? Suho remembered himself during the last battle that took place that day. It would be quicker to show you. Look at this. Swoosh. Use skill spiritual body manifestation. Suho raised his sword and casted the spiritual body manifestation technique. A black aura flowed through his arms and wrists and drew sword energy from the blade. Seeing that, Amut's eyes flashed. Wow, it's quite good, extending the spiritual body manifestation technique to weapons. Was this originally possible? Of course, but Tarnak couldn't do it. It was something that even an iron body monarch couldn't do? Suho was surprised at Amut's unexpected answer. Amut smiled meaningfully and stared at Suho intently. Yes, since he was a goblin from birth, the only thing he could do was to strengthen his body. Actually, that alone was good enough, but you are different. Suho was not a goblin, but the son of a shadow monarch. If the starting point is different, the result is bound to be different. I'm curious too. What kind of monster will you turn into if you master spiritual body manifestation? Swoosh! At that moment, Amut's body grew larger and began to transform into a spiritual body. If you're done with your business, let's start training now. Wait a minute, I'm not yet ready. The heavy gravitational field pressed down on Suho. A workout, no, a daily quest that was harder than fighting Croatia had begun. Chapter 80, Chapter 79, Hyunmu Guild 2nd Management Division. Where did I see him? I'm sure I've seen him somewhere. Hyunmu Guild's section chief Lee Young-ho had been immersed in thought since earlier while watching the video of the large-scale disaster filmed by a drone. In the paused video, 3 hunters were captured soaring towards the hive with black wings spread. 2 of them were the famous Lim Taegyu and Baek Miho, so he could recognize them. The problem was the other one. The identity of the 3rd hunter was not known yet. It seems that Baiko Guild and the Reaper Guild are controlling the information. Yes, accordingly, they are responding to reporters' requests with thorough silence. That means, yes. In an instant, Section Chief Lee Young-ho and his subordinates nodded their heads to each other with eyes filled with confidence. That means they haven't recruited that hunter yet. I think so too. If they already got him, there's no reason to hide the information. Rather, it will be widely publicized and used to promote their guild. Of course, wing buffs are rare. As far as known, Lim Taegyu and Baek Miho did not have the skill to grow wings. If so, it was the 3rd hunter who gave the buff. The strategic value of a hunter who could give others the ability to fly was enormous, regardless of class. Rather, the lower the rating, the better. Low cost, but high value for money. We have to somehow recruit this useful guy before other guilds snatch him away. In particular, he should never be in the Baiko Guild. Baiko Guild was famous for recruiting only hunters with beast transformation skills, but healers and buff hunters were exceptions. Since that hunter has a wing ability, there was a high possibility that it was included as a beast transformation skill. Baiko Guild would surely not miss the chance no matter what. First of all, make a contract. Meanwhile, I'll try to figure out his identity somehow. What about the offer? We're not playing here. Leave the deposit item blank for now. If he's someone who just awakened, we should try to offer him as much as we can. Heh. All right, but how will you find out who he is? With my head. Chief Lee Young-ho pressed his forehead with 2 fingers as if he were using superpowers, and his eyes flashed. You know what? Before Cataclysm, I was a hairdresser. I remembered every face and name of every customer who had ever passed me by. Here we go again. With the same repertoire every time, the subordinate shook his head and went back to his seat. However, Lee Young-ho believed in his sharp memory. I've seen him. It's definitely a face in my memory. What have I missed? In his head, countless hunters' faces began to unfold like a panorama. I haven't met him in person. If I did, I would have remembered right away. Was it a face I saw on HunterNet or on the news? Ah! I remember now. Section Chief Lee Young-ho suddenly jumped out of his seat with bloodshot eyes. That's him, that E-Class summoning hunter who dared to knock us down. What, an E-Class hunter? The subordinate who was printing the contract next to him tilted his head and asked, Yes, punk, ha ha ha. Also, don't you know me? It's only been a month, so how can I forget it? The employee still looked puzzled at the words of the section chief. Chief, are you sure? If he's really E-Class, how did he get 3 people to fly, even if it's a skill? Wouldn't he run out of mana and fall? That's what we need to figure out. Regardless of the method, make sure to recruit him. The other guilds will also have their eyes on him right now, so hurry up. We're working overtime again today. Meanwhile, the Baiko Guild was having a hard time because of Suho. Vice President, other guilds keep asking for the identity of that hunter. What should we do? Just pretend you don't know. That's kind of weird. Since his face is already widely known, they must be looking for each of the C-Class hunters in the Seoul area to check too. Try to hold out until we recruit him first. Baek Miho had been holding on to her cell phone with a nervous expression on her face. However, no matter how many times she tried to call Suho, he wouldn't answer. Are you sleeping? If you see this text, She had already sent a text message, but even if she waited long enough, she never got a reply. He didn't give me a wrong number, did he? If he did, someone else would have received it. Or maybe, did he block me? No, it can't be. That didn't even make sense. Yeah, there's no reason to block me, right? We fought together as colleagues. I even carried him on my back. Oh wait, could it be that President Lim Taegyu already took him? Baek Miho's eyes raged when he thought of Lim Taegyu. If they were colleagues who fought together, Lim Taegyu was the same. That guild already went into hell due to the incident, and it was no exaggeration to say that they were completely ruined financially. Even just dealing with the situation and paying compensation to the casualties would have cost an astronomical amount. It's not impossible, though. President Lim Taegyu himself is an S-class hunter. A hunter's true strength comes from force, not money. Even if all the hunters of the Reaper Guild left, it could be built again as long as Lim Taegyu, an S-class hunter, was there. Either rebuild the guild or start a new guild. In such a situation, Lim Taegyu would never want to miss out on that outstanding hunter named Suho. Vice President? Baek Miho was muttering to herself with an anxious expression when the personnel manager of Baeko Guild spoke. Was this hunter Suho really that great? Even though the wing buff is rare, I heard that he is only a C-class hunter. He's not just a C-class, Baek Miho said firmly. It doesn't matter if it's his hunter level or a wing buff. Hunter Suho. Other guilds didn't know anything right now. The only reason they care about Suho is probably because of the wing buff, or maybe because he was the only hunter who could be recruited among the three who stopped the disaster. Since they couldn't recruit Lim Taegyu or herself, their purpose was to take the other one and use him to promote their guild. But Baek Miho was different. She watched Suho's battle closer than anyone else. In the scene of a bloody battle, he is someone who should not be taken away by anyone. 13 missed calls. What's with this many calls? Suho, who managed to get out of the shadow dungeon after completing the difficult daily quest, checked his phone. Half of them were Baek Miho and Lim Taegyu's numbers, and the other half were unknown numbers. Keh! How wonderful. Young Master's popularity is overwhelming. Calm down. It's not that much. While eight-legged Beru was spinning and bursting into a frenzy of joy, Quay skillfully turned on the computer and showed Suho the news on the internet. Master, would you like to see this? It seems that the Master's face has spread through various media this time. I see. The internet was burning hot because of the disaster caused by Lee Min-sung. Of course, there had been many news about Suho until now, but most of them knew him as Beast King Crow because he was wearing a crow mask. This time, things were very different. Since the famous Baek Miho and Lim Taegyu were right next to him, Suho's face was also widely publicized. Quay, who was watching Suho's reaction from the side, quickly knelt down and begged. I have committed a mortal sin. It looks like you're having trouble dealing with what I've done this time. Raise your head, sinner! And die! Beru cut Quay's head at this time, but it quickly got back together, and Suho's mana was drained. Quay didn't even care about Beru and just looked at Suho. Sorry, but were you hiding your identity? No, it's not really like that. Right now, young Master is quietly developing his strength. It's because there could be apostles from outer space acting secretly on Earth. His eyes flashed meaningfully, and he opened his mouth. Even at this moment, far away in space, His Majesty is fighting a fierce war with outer powers. The fact that the gate opened on Earth was also something they did to target our backline. Beru gave a long speech to the newcomer, Quay, about the truth going on in the outside universe. Quay nodded and looked over at his senior with a serious face. He was quick to understand, because he had already instinctively realized the truth about the monarchs to some extent after being turned into a worker by the Queen Bee. Right. So, are the flying insects roaming around here also the apostles of outer space? No, those are real flying insects. Is that so? In fact, from the moment they came out of the shadow dungeon, there were beings that disturbed Beru and Quay's senses. Today, unfamiliar entities were being felt near Suho's house. Young Master, why are there flying insects outside the house? Suho opened the window and checked outside. People whom he felt mana power with were watching that side of the alley. A light flashed in Suho's eyes. Hunters. Seeing that they are secretly wary of each other, it seems like they came from different groups and places. Master, there are some faces I know among them. Apparently, those guys are like scouts from guilds who came to recruit Master. They found out my personal information so quickly? Suho was a little surprised. It's only been a day since the case was solved, but he didn't know they'd already found out where he lived and came to find him. Because that's what they do. Since your face was shown, they probably spent all night scouring HunterNet or association information. Swish. Just then, the sound of the wind came from outside the window. When Suho did not come out of the house, no matter how long they waited, someone launched a drone with a camera on it. Then, as if the others didn't want to lose, they started to take out drones as well. They seemed to be checking through the window to see if Suho was inside the house. What the? Even drones? Suho frowned. Are hunters not given any privacy at all? After the cataclysm, the world is in a state of emergency, so they tend to ignore minor laws. Geek! The villain will take care of it right away. Don't do it. Suho pulled Beru's antenna as he was about to jump out. Beru groaned while clinging to his hand. If you draw too much public attention, there is a risk that the existence of Master will be exposed to unknown outer apostles. If true outer apostles exist, it seems that I have already been exposed. Besides, shouldn't it be known that I am the son of the Shadow Monarch anyway? That's right, but still. Suho had no intention of leaving them alone. Ruler's power. As Suho stretched out his hand, an invisible hand crushed all the drones that were flying in the air. Swoosh! Smash! What? Why did it suddenly? As their drones exploded one after another, the scouts hiding in the alley were extremely perplexed. Those flying insects shouldn't go away with this. Show me what you saw. Right then. Basti. Suho's cell phone vibrated. Who is this again? Suho's eyes widened as he checked his phone with an annoyed expression. Uncle, Suho's uncle. The call came from Yu Jinho, the husband of his father's only sister. Yu Jinho was an adult. Suho was grateful to, as he had been taking care of Suho ever since his parents went missing. He must have seen the news. A troubled look appeared on Suho's face. He was already worried about how much explanation he would make.